Okay, so today we're going to be talking about information regarding high-rise fires. Where we came up with this module is this last quarter's East Valley Command training. The command officers did the covered high-rise incidents, and what we've suggested, our East Deputy has suggested an operations division has suggested that we follow that with the training from the next month. Somebody, if you'll mute your mic, if you would, somebody out there's you got your mic on here.
This where it comes up missing.
Let me see here real quick here. Sorry. We can figure out who it is here. Anyway, please mute your mic. Sorry. Please mute your mics here for those of you that aren't doing that. But anyway, so we do East Valley Command training, and we covered high-rise fires. And then in an effort to try to stay consistent with our company officers, we're going to do high-rise training here and Tactical Tuesday as well. So the biggest difference, you guys, and this is Captain Obvious stuff here, but obviously, you know, as we manage incidents in high-rise, they're much different than anything we do from a residential, even commercial perspective. They're a completely different type of event, which creates a number of challenges for us that are not readily seen in our typical fires that we respond to. So you'll see some of the stuff we talk about here today. We'll talk about some built-in fire protection systems, some of the challenges with these buildings. We'll talk about strategic, tactical, and task objectives. We'll talk about some of the building size up, risk management profile, the 7-unit deployment model. We'll spend a lot of time talking about that this morning. And then we'll talk about some of the unique high-rise safety considerations and other things that come into play. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, if you have questions, you can either send them to the chat. I've got Captain Paul Liddell with me here that'll try to monitor the chat. And if you have questions, you can certainly send them there. Or if you have, if you're not able to get through to him, just unmute for a second and ask the question, and we'll try to address anything you may have. So in the Valley, we consider a high rise in the Phoenix region anything that's defined as 6 elevator stops or greater, or 75 feet in height or higher. So once again, we've got a number of these. In the East Valley, we've got probably half dozen or so, maybe if we look east of Price Road, maybe a few more than that. But as we head west, obviously we need to get into Tempe. They've got probably at this point in time close to 50 buildings that are 7 floors or higher, counting ASU and all the new high-rise corridor they have. And then obviously when we get into Phoenix, we have 100 plus. So some of you may be wondering if I'm in Scottsdale or Gilbert or Queen Creek or someplace else, why are we talking about high-rise? Why does that matter to me? Well, as you'll see as we go through this process, that if there's an actual working high-rise fire in the Valley, that it'll go to probably a minimum of 3 and probably closer to 5 alarms, which is going to pull a lot of your jurisdictions into these incidents here. And especially if you have something that's ongoing for any duration of time, it'll go much deeper than that. So you may have a chance to get dispatched to a high-rise fire, and then we all know that Murphy's Law says that you'll be doing a patient follow-up or something in Tempe, and sure enough, you'll get dispatched to a high-rise fire, you'll add on or something, and you'll be first due or one of the first 7 units. So we're hoping that through this training today, you'll know what to do. One of the other things we've had is I've been to probably, well, certainly over my last 40 years here, probably 50 high-rise drills. But in the last probably 3 years, I've probably been to 20 high-rise drills in different agencies here. Well, sorry about the last 10 years, sorry. Probably been about 20 different high-rise drills. And one of the things I find out from our company officers is we've got these great plans. But then when we give somebody, for example, if they're the stairwell team, they say, well, you know, I got the 7-unit deployment model. I look at my card, everything looks really good. But then what happens if I get to the 3rd floor and I run into a patient and things like that? So we're hoping to answer some of those questions from the perspective of a company officer that aren't covered in necessarily the high-rise plan, but things that you'll be expected to know what to do if we encounter them in a high-rise fire. So understand that fighting fire in a high-rise building is a complex operation. That's an understatement. It must be on a solid foundation, and and a lot of the things that we do is we set up the fire to make the differences to how successful we are in the outcome of the incident. So this is why you'll see the high-rise plan, which was developed about a year and a half ago now. This is a ROCC, our Regional Operations Consistency Committee, put this plan together with a number of all of our Valley agencies put this together. And so we're all on the same page, hopefully, and that's what we're hoping to see here is a standard approach to high-rise fires, and hopefully we'll have a successful outcome. So let's talk about high-rise basics for a minute. Um, for the most part, they say there's about 14,500 high-rise structure fires a year, which results in about 40 deaths, 520 injuries, and $150 million in property loss. This one, once again, probably pretty obvious if we were to ask the question, what types of high-rise fires or what types of buildings create the most high-rise fires, and that's going to be apartments with 62%. We got some motels, hotel fires, dormitory fires, care facilities, and then office building fires make up the majority of our high-rise fires. And this probably isn't surprising to any of you as well, that the leading cause of all high-rise fires is cooking. So that kind of connects with the apartment fire in the bullet point above. Also, keep in mind that for the most part, most high-rise fires begin on floors no higher than the 6th story. So that actually does quite a few things for us here as far as our ability to access the fire quickly, to get resources to the fire floor quickly. So that certainly is beneficial to us, but we also have to prepare for those incidents that occur higher up. And then this last one here, fire spread advancement often results from failed or malfunctioning building systems. And this is one of those where you think, well, how often does this happen? It actually happens quite a bit. If you look at I've done quite a bit of research with high-rise events, and you'll find that in a lot of the major high-rise fires, there was at least one or more systems that failed, either prior to the event, during the event, or that they determined after the event had occurred. The types of high-rise fires we see here, and just the level of origin, you can see that obviously apartment fires, 40% clear between the 2nd and 6th floor, 41% between 7 and higher, and some of the other things. So the big thing probably to take away here, if you just look at the different charts, is a lot of fires occur below the 7th floor, and a lot of fires occur on the 1st floor. A lot of fires occur above the 7th floor, and a lot of fires occur on the 1st floor. And we're going to talk about how that's important for us in a minute. Another thing that it points out here is that fires that originate above the 30th floor account for 55% of the injuries and 60% of the fatalities in high-rise fires. So on the surface, that sounds pretty bad. Fortunately for us, there's not a lot of buildings higher than 30 floors in the East Valley. Now, obviously, Phoenix has some higher than that. Tempe has just one right now that's at 32. But there's several on the books, I believe, in Tempe that are at least 30, and I wouldn't be surprised, obviously, as we move forward, as a lot of our construction becomes vertical, that we'll see more and more 30-story or taller buildings. Now, as we also talk about that, when we talk about Phoenix having buildings that are taller than 30 stories, obviously, if you have a problem on the 29th floor in Phoenix or the 45th floor in Phoenix, that's going to require a lot more resources than a fire on the 3rd floor, probably in Tempe or someplace else, depending on the size and exposures and other things associated with that. So let's talk briefly about some historical high-rise fires. Let's talk about how some of the things that have set us up here for that has determined why we do the things that we do in our 7-unit deployment model. First of all, for those of you that are around in 1980, and I'm guessing that most of you, some of you probably weren't even born in 1980, but certainly a lot of you were on the fire department in 1980. But the MGM Grand Hotel fire had 87 deaths, 75 from smoke inhalation, which probably doesn't surprise people, but a lot of the things that they learned from that fire was they had 61 deaths on upper floors between the 19th and 24th floor, mostly in the stairwell. And one of the things they determined, and one of the problems they had, is that some of the high rises, and this still exists today, the only way you can get out of the high rise out of the stairwell, once you get into it, is either on the 1st floor or the roof. And so that creates problems for you, obviously, if you're stuck somewhere in between and you want to get off the floor because it's either becoming contaminated or for some other reason you don't have the ability to exit the floors. So this is one of the challenges they had. Obviously, they found 61 people dead there, 700 people injured, including 14 firefighters. It's a 26-story building, which we have a number of here in the Valley. 200 plus firefighters. We're going to talk quite a bit about the number of firefighters it takes to try to address these high-rise fires. And this one you'll see here, we're 200 plus firefighters. So you're talking about probably getting into the 8th and 9th alarm as you start talking about 200 firefighters. 5,000 people evacuated. That's a lot of people to evacuate, and that's a lot of people to try to manage once they've exited the building if you happen to be in charge of that incident. The other thing that was interesting about this incident is the fire actually started and was limited to the 1st floor. So obviously, for those of you in the fire service, that's probably not surprising. Obviously, smoke goes up and out. And we have a situation here where the fire, even though the fire started on the 1st floor, as you read above here, 75 people that died up there, or 61 of the people that died on between the 19th and 24th floor. So that's one of the things we talk about as we talk about stairwell teams and other things, clearing the building and stuff, the importance of checking the entire structure, not just the stairwells and other things as we complete our all clear of the building. And also in this situation, this incident, we had 10 bodies that were found in elevators. So we're going to talk quite a bit about elevators today and some other stuff that'll come along to play there. So this is one of the reasons that we recall and verify the location of all the elevators on arrival, which we'll talk about. And it's also one of the reasons that we use stairwell teams to bring that, we suggest stairwell teams bring a set of irons or a rabbit tool, is so that we can get out of the stairwells if we get them as well. Obviously, you know that we have fire rated doors in there. If they have glass in there, they're typically wired glass. So even if we're in there ourselves, if we get into a situation where we need to get out of the stairwells because we're on floor 26th and we're running out of air or something of that nature, at least we have the ability to, with our irons just to get out of the stairwell if needed. The next one here, this is a big one for those who were in the fire service for a number of years here, and they still talk about it today, is the first interstate tower fire that was in Los Angeles. This was a huge fire that occurred. It had one dead. They only had one fatality, which was pretty amazing because it was an after-hours fire. But the thing about it is, in this situation, is they used 383 firefighters and 600 SCBA bottles during the extinguishment process. So as you can imagine, the time, the amount of people, the amount of resources. Obviously, if we pulled 383 firefighters in the valley here to an incident that we had at a high-rise fire, that would pretty much probably pull almost, at least on-duty crews, you'd probably pull a vast majority of, certainly all the East Valley cities would be involved in that, and probably every company from the East Valley if we had a situation that required 383 firefighters and a good percentage of Tempe as well. This one, they used 20 hand lines. This is a 62 floor building, obviously creates a lot more challenges than some of the stuff we have here. But the fires were on floors 12 through 17, and this burned for 3 hours and 40 minutes. They had 15 floors were affected with water damage or other things, and $450 million fire loss. So this was kind of a bellwether fire that we talk about, at least we certainly did early in my career, about some of the challenges associated with a major high-rise fire, an ongoing high-rise fire. The One Meridian Plaza fire is one that you may have heard about. I hope you've heard about, or at least you've read about. If not, I would suggest you read about it. But the One Meridian Plaza fire was one that occurred back in 1991. There was 3 firefighters fatalities that occurred through it. 24 firefighters were injured. It was a 12 alarm fire that included over 300 plus firefighters being involved in it. Burned for 19 hours. So this is one you can imagine it would be a challenge that of epic proportions. 38 floors. Phoenix has buildings at 38 floors or greater, so this is something that could occur in the valley in theory. And when the fire was finally, it involved floors 22 to 30. When the fire was finally extinguished, it was extinguished on the 30th floor with basically 10 sprinkler heads that kept the fire in check until it burned itself out. So with everything they had, it had partial coverage of the sprinkler systems. They had problems with the pressure relief valves and the standpipe systems. It was one of the problems that created issues for their firefighters, where they had, which is where we've had a lot of the major changes in the fire service occurred after this fire. When the 93 fire code changed a lot of the requirements for high-rise incidents. But this is actually an incident where they abandoned the building because this is the first structure fire that they had that I'm aware of, where the building burned for so long that they were afraid that the top half of the building would actually topple off into the street or into the next building. So they evacuated the building and then they pretty much let it burn itself out. And at that point in time, like I say, when it finally hit the 30th floor, it was put out with the sprinklers that were there. Chicago Cook Administration fire building they had that occurred in 2003. This is a big one. I know when I was in the fire department, we talked about this quite a bit. The fire was on the 12th floor, which was an unusual. 35th floor, a 35-story building. 135 firefighters, once again, not unusual. We talked about the number of resources required, but this is the one where they actually found the bodies of 13 workers in the stairwell. And this is one where they actually received a number of phone calls from the victims in the stairwell during the fire. And at some point in time, by the time that the fire department addressed the people that were in the stairwell, 13 of them had died in the thing, and they revived some of those folks. Like I say, it says here 7 of the victims were revived, 6 of them suffocated and died. But that changed a lot of our approach to stairwell teams and everything else associated with that because of the victims that were located in the fire. The fire itself was a significant fire. But because the fire department directed all the resources for the most part to the fire attack that they didn't address the stairwells until later on, and they had a number of victims. So that's one of the reasons we now have stair teams to check and clear the stairwells early in the fire, and actually one of the first things that we do. This is an incident, the Greenfell Tower fire that occurred here in 2017. All of you, I hope, have either read something about it or seen something associated with it. But this was a fire that they had 80 fatalities. It was associated with some they had did some remodeling of the building, and the way the insulation and some of the siding that they put on the side of the structure created a pathway and a vertical channel that allowed fire to spread very quickly. This fire, I think, started on the second floor. They ended up using 45 engines, 200 plus firefighters, and the 24-floor building. One of the sad things about this, if you read, there's a lot of stories and there's huge lawsuits. I think it's $2 billion in lawsuits that are either pending still, or I don't know if they've been settled. But anyway, one of the things that was so really tragic about this is many of the occupants that died were told to shelter in place by fire. So this is kind of one of those where, and I'm sure fire meant well. It certainly wasn't anything that was intentional from that perspective. When they got there, I'm sure they thought they could control the fire, and obviously, as you can see from the picture, it didn't take long for the fire to extend throughout the entire structure. So this is one where, we learned some lessons here as well, and we'll talk a little bit about shelter in place versus evacuation in a minute. Next incident occurred just a few years ago, also at the Marco Polo condo apartments. It was interesting, probably because I was able to watch it live. A lot of people were. They showed it live on TV for a while here on CNN and some other places. And but this one, they had ended up with 4 people dead, 13 people injured, including 1 firefighter. 5th alarm fire. So just trying to reinforce the resources that are going to be required on these type of incidents, so that we understand that as we talk about going to a 3rd alarm early on in these fires, that you don't scratch your head and wonder, why do we have so many people coming to this incident? This is the kind of resources that are going to be required. On this incident, the fire started on the 26th floor, spread to the 27th, 28th, and 200 units were damaged. So we're going to talk just for a couple of minutes about Highrise 101, some of the basics here, and we're not going to get into a lot of building construction because we certainly don't have enough time to spend going through every portion of building construction and from that perspective. But we'll try to cover at least some of the basics so that we can be at least familiar with high-rise fires, at least what to expect on some of the incidents that we go to. So to start off with, let's talk about commercial or residential. If we drive down the street in Tempe, Phoenix, or other places that have a number of high rises, you're going to see all types of buildings. And one of the easiest ways, obviously, to determine for the most part whether it's going to be commercial or residential. And when I talk about residential, I mean that also can include hotels and other things of that nature. But the first thing you'll probably notice on these things is that whether you have balconies or no balconies. So that's one of the first things we can use to determine with a commercial structure. Typically, you're not going to see a whole lot of balconies. May see some signage on the building as far as from the, you'll see a labeling of whether it be State Farm, University of Phoenix, Bank of America, whatever it may be. You'll typically see some signage of some kind. Usually doesn't have balconies. Occasionally you'll see some balconies on the upper floors with some areas for either their lunchrooms or other things like that maybe, but you're not going to see a whole lot of balconies for the most part in these types of structures. Interior configuration we'll talk about in a minute, but you typically don't have the confined areas as you do in the residential stuff, which we'll talk more about in the next couple of slides. Residentials, obviously we're going to see balconies that are going to be common. You're typically going to have center hallways in these type of structures, so you have from the standpoint of your hose stretches and other things of that nature, you're gonna have a little different setup in obviously a residential structure than you will probably in a commercial building, and you'll see that with some of the slides we have coming up here. So when we look at high-rise floor plans, obviously we know there's a ton of different configurations in our high rises as far as the shapes of the buildings, but typically you're going to see for most of your residential structures, you're going to see compartmentalized structures. You're going to see rooms with center hallways that have confined spaces. You may see some general common areas, for example, the gymnasiums, by the pool. They may have some other areas, a rec room and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, most of your residential high-rise structures are going to be compartmentalized versus your commercial structures, which a good percentage of those are going to be some open floor plans. And you'll see some of those in the design that we have below here. You may see what we call cubicle farms. There's some of the structures, if you've I had the benefit of working in Tempe, obviously, for a number of years, and when they first built the State Farm buildings that are on the lake over there, that we went over and toured them both before they were occupied and after. And one of the things you'll see there is they have basically cubicle farms that cover probably about an acre or two with very little separation. In the corners, you may see an office or two that actually has some windows and doors, but for the most part, as far as the eye can see, it's just cubicle after cubicle. And I know when we did some fire drills over there in the past that we have, it's pretty amazing to see because some of those buildings hold over 5,000 people when they're fully occupied. And so you can imagine when you hit the fire alarm and try to evacuate those buildings, and we've done that a couple of times during drills and during fire drills and stuff. It's pretty amazing to see the number of people that actually come out of those structures, and you can also imagine the challenge of trying to enter and exit or enter through the front door and go up the stairs when all these people are trying to come out. So some of the challenges that will come along with something like that. This is just a floor plan you can see of a high-rise structure here, so you can see not only the layout, but some of the confusion you might have in a limited visibility situation, whether you're trying to gain access to a fire, whether you're trying to conduct a search. It's somewhat similar to if any of you have ever had a restaurant fire trying to work a hose line through the dining room. It's very challenging if you work your way in. There's chairs, there's other obstructions, 150 different hiding places for people to be. Very difficult to try to search a floor like this or to try to address a fire that may be associated in a floor plan of this nature. A couple of other things to consider, some of the floor plans. This is a couple of examples of floor plans of some high rises that are in Tempe right now. But if you look there, you can see the cubicle farm kind of in some of these areas here, and just the sheer office, the sheer space. Some of these structures have over 10,000 square foot per floor. So, I mean, if you start doing the math, I mean, it's basically 2,500 square foot houses that are spread around throughout a structure. So this is as we start talking about the difficulties of not only fighting fire here and the amount of the sheer fire load and other challenges, but we're also talking about the ability to search an area of this size is going to require a number of crews, certainly if you have any limited visibility at all. But you can see the floor plans on just a couple of these here. Another thing that you might see on some structure and some of the structures, there'll be typically commercial buildings, maybe a real high-end residential structure, but you'll see convenience stairs. And convenience stairs are stairwells that you'll see that will actually connect two floors without a vestibule or a contained stairwell. So you can see that upper picture on the left there. So some of you see this a lot in law offices where they'll have offices over 1 or 2 stories, maybe even 3, and they'll have a stairwell connecting both of those that isn't an enclosed stairwell. So that creates some problems for us as far as fire spread and other things, obviously, if we have a fire on that floor. We talk about configurations of structures. Obviously, if you look at the high rises around the valley, there's every shape and size that are out there. This is one that I spent a tremendous amount of my time during my career. I spent the vast majority of my 37 years in Tempe downtown. So I've probably been to this building 50 times plus for some types of event as far as fire event. They have a trash chute that burned every 15 minutes during the school season or during the school semester. Anyway, they've remodeled it and sprinkled now, but there were certainly some challenges that we had early on in this in my careers at this building here. And we'll talk more about some of the challenges associated with these types of buildings in a few minutes as well. Core construction. High rises, there's about 1,000 different configurations here, but one of the things that they started doing in the 80s was some core construction. When the core construction, you basically have all of your elevators, stairwells, a lot of your plumbing, all that kind of stuff, your bathrooms and stuff in a center core, and then your offices and other things around the outside. The good part about it is it gives a lot of window space for offices and things like that from a leasing perspective. The bad thing about it from our perspective is that fire can burn around you and behind you if you're not careful. So we talk about when we're having fires in core construction structures, we just need to be careful if we get out on the floor, out of the stairwell on the floor, and understand that there is a possibility that the fire can come around behind us. And so that way, and when we're talking about core construction fires, if we actually have a significant working fire, that we would strongly suggest getting a second line in place prior to making that fire attack so that you have the ability to have someone protect your backside so that we don't get ourselves into a bind. We talk about some of the center hallway stuff. Like I said, you see this a lot with the residential construction, and typically your stairs are going to be located on either end of the building. Sometimes you'll see some in the middle, depending on the length of the hallways. But these give us a different perspective from our fire attack. This is when we talk about selecting our attack stairwell versus evacuation stairwell will come into place. And this is one of those where it's sometimes a challenge for us to determine the correct stairwell to operate out of. We had a Tempe, and we'll talk about this later in the class here, but Tempe had a working high-rise fire just a couple of months ago here. And one of the challenges that they had is they started stretching lines, and they made the fire department, got the line to the interior of the fire department, made the fire attack. But as they were cleaning up and finishing up inside the apartment, one of the crews came out of the door, literally across the hall, which was another stairwell. So they stretched 150 feet of 2.5-inch line all the way down the hallway to get to the fire department, and they were literally probably 12 or 15 feet from another stairwell that they didn't choose for the fire attack stairwell. So sometimes it's going to be maybe a little difficult for us. We'll talk about stairwell teams and choosing the right stairwell here in a few minutes, but just understand that there's some of these buildings can be very complex, and we may have to do quite a bit of work to try to get in the right place to operate. Another challenge we have in high rises, especially the commercial high rise, is the plenum space. For commercial buildings, some of the commercial stuff we have, you'll see, and we'll talk about it more in just in a slide or two here, is some of they utilize some of the overhead spacing for cabling and other things of that nature. But just understand with drop ceilings and other stuff, we can have challenges with the void space being almost 25% of the floor area. So we need to keep that in mind as we talk about hidden fire, if we talk about fire spread and other things of that nature, that we need to make sure we're taking control of and looking into the plenum spaces overhead as well. This is another slide here that I wasn't aware of as far as just some of the challenges associated with this, but this is one of our chief officers, Chief Slayer, had talked about meeting with FDNY, and one of the things they talked about in some of their commercial structures is the overhead cable trays and the ones below the floor as well. They talk about that 1 foot of this cabling that they have here can create up to 150,000 BTUs, equal to about 1.5 gallons of gasoline. So if you can imagine some of our the state farms and other places like that are data centers and stuff, that we might have a tremendous amount of fire load either under the floors or above our heads that we're not aware of. So we need to keep that in mind. And also, just one of the things he told me about, and I've never seen this personally, but he said that buildings that have in-floor cabling system like that are required to have a suction cup removal device in the fire control room. So I haven't personally seen that, but my understanding is they should by code. As you go into the fire control room, you may encounter something that looks like a couple of suction cups with a handle on it that you can remove the panels to be able to access the subfloor. So now that we've kind of learned a little bit about the basics and some historical fires, we're going to talk about fighting fire in a high-rise building. So we don't do a lot of this. This is a high-risk, low-frequency event. I've been in the fire service now for 40 years, and I know I personally have only been to probably less than a half dozen that would be considered working fires, and most of those were a kitchen fire or something small that didn't certainly extend out of the apartment involved. I was on the fire department when the Bank One fire happened in Phoenix and a few other fires that occurred that were sustained fires, but I did not respond to them. But I've probably been dispatched to probably between 50 and 100 high-rise fires, so I've been to a lot of them, but as far as actual working sustained fires, there's not a lot of people in the fire service that actually have been to these in the East Valley or any place in the Valley at all. So we'll talk about balancing early and often. We talk about resources. We're going to talk about resources a whole lot today. Resources are one of those challenges we have on any significant fire we have. One of our last classes, we talked about big boxes and some of the resources required for big box incidents. But high-rise fires are even more of a challenge for us than that. If somebody can mute their mic out there, if you would, for us. Thank you. So anyway, if you get dispatched to a high-rise fire, and you get dispatched to a high-rise fire, and while responding, if you happen to see any indications of a working fire, I would tell you to go upgrade the incident to as much as a third alarm incident. I know probably most of our company officers probably wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I would certainly hope you'd go to at least a first, but our command officers will, if you don't, should take it right to a third alarm. Because the resources are going to be required on an actual working fire are going to be a great requirement for us. This is an incident that I had years ago here, just to kind of show you. This is on the initial dispatch on this incident here was at the Marriott. Said it was going to be a high-rise fire, working high-rise fire, but there was 31 units dispatched on the original dispatch for a first alarm working fire. We got this on the MCT, which was kind of interesting because it says there's actually a 7th floor active smoke and fire on the 7th floor. We thought was going to be pretty interesting. You can see a lot of units on the scene. It ended up being just a small kitchen fire that was extinguished by the sprinklers, but these are resource heavy events. So just be aware of that. Don't be surprised if you don't have a lot of units come in and don't don't be embarrassed if you have signs of a working fire calling for several alarms, because they're going to be needed if we actually have a working fire. One of the things we talk about here on this, if we talk about balancing early and often and when we arrive, and we're going to get more into this in a few slides here, but just also as we pull up, one of the things we do right now, if we have a working fire in a residential structure or apartment complex or something of that nature, one of the things we've determined through modern fire attack is if we can knock the fire down early, that'll reduce the possibility of flashover and some other challenges for our firefighters. So a lot of times people don't think about this in a high-rise fire, because we think, well, we've got the 7-unit deployment model. There's a specific number of things that need to take place to set us up for success in these incidents. And that is still true, but we will tell you that if you actually have a working fire that is within reach of either a hand line, a 2.5-inch hand line, a stain gun, or even, we'll talk more about that, even an aerial apparatus, that it may be a consideration for us to implement a transitional attack on a high-rise fire as well, if indicated. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. So this is Chief Vincent Dunn. I believe he was FDNY. Somebody mentioned they thought Philadelphia, but I thought he was FDNY. But anyway, what he had mentioned was that he said we need to plan on getting 100 firefighters on the fire ground and operating inside the building within the first 15 minutes of the event to be successful in a high-rise. So 100 firefighters is a lot. That's, for us, is going to be greater than a third alarm. So just getting 100 firefighters on the scene on one of our scene within 15 minutes is going to be a lot, and getting them inside the building to go to work is even going to be a bigger challenge for us. But we're going to talk about how we can do that, or hopefully how we can do that. So you might ask yourself, why in the world do we need a third alarm on a high-rise fire? Well, this is just a little breakdown you can see of just some of the assignments that are required to. This is a third alarm in the valley here, brings about 92 personnel to the scene. But if you start looking at this this breakdown of the requirements as far as getting 3 units on the fire floor above, the stair teams, both the evacuation stair team and the fire attack stair team, a brick team or on deck with rescue responsibility team, evacuation, medical, search rescue, hazmat, TRT, some of the other things that may come into place. And then if you look at the sector officers, it talks about at least a minimum of 12 chief officers to really address all the different sectors that we may encounter on a high-rise fire. So we're going to need all the resources we can get if we actually have a working incident. This also gives you a little bit of just the command structure, so you can kind of see the breakdown of what you might have if you had an incident a working incident at a high-rise fire, whether it be branched. Probably in some of these situations would probably be branched to some extent, depending on the number of the patients and other things that we might have. So as a company officer, one of the reasons that we're going over all this stuff, and we're going to review this material, is that you're going to probably, if you come in, arrive certainly in the first 7 units, there's a real good chance that you're going to become a sector officer, and maybe that sector officer for a significant period of time. As you showed there before, we're going to get, at some point in time, we probably will have a minimum of 12 chief officers in place, but it's going to take us a while for them to get there. So as a company officer, we need to be prepared so that when we get there, that we can operate hopefully effectively in whatever sector we may be in for at least a short period of time until we get replaced by a chief officer. So one of the things you should ask yourself anytime you go to anywhere in the valley here, because everything in the valley here, for the most part, is sprinkled. I'm not aware of any buildings less or greater than 7 floors that isn't sprinkled in the valley. And if anybody in the room here is, anybody know of anything? So for the most part, everything in the valley here is going to be sprinkled for that we are responding to that's greater than 7 stories. Now, a lot of the buildings that you just saw on fire that I showed you earlier were sprinklered as well, at least partially sprinkled or fully sprinkled. So one of the things we certainly need to ask ourselves if we're responding to a building, a high rise, and we've got a working fire is what's going on and why is it still burning? Because they obviously have complex systems, safety systems, and extinguishing systems that are designed to put these fires out. So there's got to be a reason that these buildings are still burning. And one of the things you can see right there is fire and smoke control systems have historically failed 50% of the time on working fires in high rises. So that's a big deal for us. I mean, so there, and when we get there, some of the things we'll talk about, depending on the sector you're in, may come into play too, as to how we can address and troubleshoot some of those issues that maybe we can get those systems operational again and either reduce damage or help control the fire. But just keep that in mind. There's other reasons that we may have a working fire in a high rise that aren't just systems only. Everything from arson, where if somebody brings a 10-gallon can of gasoline up on the 12th floor and lights off a floor, it may overwhelm the sprinkler system initially or completely. People may shut down systems for repairs and other things of that nature that may have the system is non-operational, at least on that floor or portions of the building or the entire building, depending on what the situation is. The fire pump may be out of service and other things that may cause us to this. So just understand that fire systems, built-in fire systems, protection system may fail. So this is what should be happening in a high-rise building. If you look at this little video here, you can see the fire starts on the floor. Smoke is getting exhausted out of the from the building, removed from the building. The elevators have been recalled. They're pressurizing both the elevator shafts and the stairwells here. The sprinklers will come on in a minute here. They're pressurizing it or evacuating smoke from the floors below and above. Fire sprinklers put out the fire. Smoke goes away. We get there and wonder what happened. But that's when everything's working perfectly. Now I'll run it one more time just while we're talking here. But just understand that this is a perfect scenario, and this happens probably the vast majority of the time. Most of our fires that we have in any high-rise building, a kitchen fire or something of that nature, typically the sprinklers activate, put the fire out, and we go and clean up some water and a little bit of water damage. One of the things that happened in the Tempe fire and that they had is once again sprinkler system failure. They had a couple of things that occurred there. They had a sprinkler that was damaged near the fire that didn't operate, and then they had another one where the deflector plate had been removed nearby. So all it did is shoot a little laser of water straight down to the floor and didn't, between the cabinet location and everything else, they had limited coverage of that building. So that's why they actually had a working fire when they got to the fire floor in Tempe. So sometimes things happen operationally that can create problems for us, but that's the ideal situation. The other thing you saw there is you see the smoke getting pumped up and out of the roof. As you respond to some of these high-rise fires, you may go, holy cow, we got a roof fire, because it may look like that. You got heavy black smoke coming off the roof of a 15-story building, but the fire itself may be on the third or fourth floor. Based upon the evacuation system and the smoke removal system they have, it may be deceptive. And that's why we go to the building systems, and that's why we check floors as we go with stereo teams to make sure that we don't bypass the fire. So first in company, I would tell you that if you work in an area that has a high rise in your first due area, I would hope you become very familiar with that structure. I would tell you that I would hope that you, even if you're in the first 7 companies that are associated with the high rise structure, I would hope you would work with your responding battalion chief or east deputy to take that opportunity to go and tour these buildings, be familiar with all the different aspects, whether it be stairwells, locations, the fire control room, whether it be the access to the roof and other things that may be in place on some of these structures, so that if you get dispatched, it won't be your first time that you've seen them. High rises are very complex buildings. If you've been into some of the fire control rooms, and I've been into probably 100 plus, and certainly in my career, and they're all different sizes. Some of them are the size of a small bathroom, and others are as big as probably 2,000 square feet. The one that's in the fire control room in the State Farm building probably is 2,000 square feet. Probably has 100 different TV screens. It's staffed 24 hours a day with about 5 people. So it's a completely different situation than a lot of the other structures that you may show up and literally you've got one enunciator panel and a printer is about all you have, depending on the building and how old it is and how that the fire control systems are designed at. So, but just keep in mind, so as you arrive on these structures, here's what a first in company might sound like, an on-scene report might sound like. Obviously, Engine 201's on the scene with an 18-story high-rise building. Nothing showing from the exterior. Evacuation is in progress. Engine 201 will be University Command and the offensive strategy, making our way to the fire control room for the report to follow. The follow-up report may sound something like this. University Command to alarm. The fire alarm panel shows smoke and heat detected on the 9th floor and smoke detected on the 10th. This is a working fire, giving the balance of a first alarm high-rise fire, then followed by a request for a second alarm assignment with level 1 staging inside the lobby, and then a third alarm assignment with level 2 staging a block or 2 away. So that may be something that would be not an unusual request, unusual radio transmissions for a working fire from an engine company that would be expected. Now, keep in mind also, and we'll talk about this more, obviously it says here, first and second alarm companies report directly to the lobby on high-rise fires. This is certainly unusual for us compared to any other fire that we respond to, but first and second alarm units are level 1 staging in the lobby. Third alarm units would then go to staging, and we'll talk about staging and distances and some of the transit times in a few slides here, but this is also another challenge we have associated with high-rise fires. But understand also one other thing to understand is that high-rise fires typically offer little to no information from the exterior, especially commercial buildings. Residential, sometimes you'll have a balcony that's open, you may have a window that's broken out or something like that, but rarely do you see a commercial building, at least on arrival, where you have a working fire from the exterior without some type of explosion or something of that nature. So we have the 7-unit deployment model. I hope all of you, wherever you're at, have either seen this little guidebook that we have that's been distributed to all East Valley departments. It should have one in every company, including chief officers. So if you're not familiar with the 7-unit deployment model, and if you don't have them, obviously contact me and we'll get some to your department, but you should have them. We've distributed them to everybody. So this is a system that was put together once again in the Highrise plan that the regional operations consistency committee put together here. It's a valley-wide plan, and we've basically just taken that and put it into some cue cards so that we can, our crew members, if they get dispatched to a high-rise fire, have an easy little some cheat cards, cheat sheets, or whatever you want to call them here, available to our folks. We know that chances are that you may go years without responding to a high-rise fire. Certainly a long time. It's a minimum. And so we know that it's probably a little bit of a challenge for us to expect all of our people to remember all seven different units, the assignments of each module, what to bring with you, what are your requirements and stuff. So our intention was to make them small enough that you could take it off the truck, not only see the equipment you need to bring with you, but then also put it in your pocket if you needed to review what are some of your responsibilities of that position. So we're going to go through each one of these things and we'll talk about them here as we go. So the first page you can see talks about the difference. So if you're the incident commander, you can go right to the first page and see what you need to do as far as assigning your first 7 companies. First company is command and building systems. Second company is you end up pumping the FDC and the attack stairwell team. Third, fourth, and fifth companies are fire attack teams. Sixth company is lobby sector, and seventh company is evacuation stairwell team. Now that's all well and good if things are working just the way you want them to do. The problem is that high-rise fires don't necessarily provide a perfect situation. So from that perspective, the incident commander, you must exercise tactical discretion when implementing this deployment model. If you arrive on the scene and you have somebody hanging out the 3rd floor or 5th floor of the building that's involved in fire, or if you have something else going on that needs to be addressed immediately, do that. We don't want you to sit there and go, well, I know that person's hanging out the floor, but Chief Bailey said the first 7 companies have to be assigned to the different things. We don't do that. Obviously, common sense needs to come into play here. That allows us to if we need to break away from the deployment model temporarily, we can do so. So if you need to assign a crew to a ladder company to do a window rescue, do that, and then just move on to the next company and just move every unit down 1 or 2 or whatever it is in the system. Also, if you determine that a transitional attack is appropriate, whether it be an aerial transitional attack or an engine company, if you decide the second engine company coming in is going to do that, give them that assignment. Third engine company now becomes the FDC and stairwell team. Not that hard to do, but I would tell you, don't just automatically discard the plan because I don't like this plan. This is one that we all maybe have different opinions on what is the best approach to a high-rise fire, but this is an agreement based upon a lot of research, working with a lot of different agencies all over the country. Phoenix worked with FDNY in Florida, Las Vegas, Houston, a bunch of other agencies that work high-rise fires on a somewhat regular basis, and they came back with a lot of information. And this is the basis for this 7-unit deployment model. It may not be perfect, but this is the one we've decided to stick with for now. But just keep in mind, once again, if you have to break away from the original 7-unit deployment model to address a critical assignment, do so. So I'm not going to go through each one of these bullet points, and you can see them. Hopefully, if you don't have if you're out there in the field, if you grab your book, you can kind of follow along if you want. But basically, the first 2 units going to establish command. They're going to assign the different sectors we talk about. The first 2 unit on a high-rise fire is going to be a busy son of a gun. That person, if you can see not only the responsibilities for the first 2 unit incident commander, but building systems is an incredibly busy assignment here. We're going to go through each one of the things that needs to take place, and you're going to wonder, man, I hope I have a 4-person crew as minimum. I'd love to have about a 6-person crew to try to address all the things that need to take place. But anyway, so we're going to kind of go through those. But you're going to establish accountability. You're going to go through all these things. Make sure, once again, you get the proper resources coming. You're going to be responsible for the building keys and some of those things, which we'll cover in a couple more slides. But you can see the equipment list there, and I won't go through each one of those items, so we talk a little bit more about them in a different session. So first thing we do, we show up at the fire control room. We go inside, try to locate the fire control room. And once again, this can be a challenge for us. We talk about, in an ideal situation, if you go, for example, the building, I'm not sure, what's the building, the Alma School in Southern called these days? It used to be B of A. Was it still B of A? Do anybody know what the name of that? Anyway. Yeah, so anyway, 1201 Alma School, the building they have there, that building is designed fantastic for a fire attack. You've got a fire control room that's right off the lobby. You got a giant lobby. You can put freaking 10 companies in it. It's got pretty good access, and I mean it's just really laid out well for this 7-unit deployment model. A lot of other buildings are not. Some lobbies can handle literally 1 or 2 companies at most, and then you got to try to figure out where I'm going to put the other ones, especially residential lobbies. A lot of times have very small lobbies. All they have is a leasing office and a front desk and a couple of chairs and a fireplace or something. So, and you'll see some examples of that in a minute. But So obviously a bigger challenge there trying to get a first and second alarm in level 1 stage and inside the lobby than it would be at the 1201 Southern building there, Alma School building. So, so first thing we need to do is locate that. The other challenge you may have, and I know it's not necessarily a high rise, but for example, the fire control room at the hospital, is it Sossman or Chrisman? Sorry, Chrisman, what's the hospital out? Sorry, I'm not. Yeah, Mountain Vista. Yeah, the Mountain Vista out there, from what I understand, and I haven't been there, but the people that have been there tell you that the fire control room is about a half mile away from the lobby. It's on a different side of the building. So once again, your lobby, I mean, your fire command and building systems, and you got to tell your crew, hey, I'm going to drop you off here. I'm going to go over to the front and work the lobby, and when you can, send somebody with all the keys and headphones over to the lobby for me. So some of these structures may be a little more complicated, and this is where we talk about doing those pre-plans and walkthroughs of some of these structures ahead of time, so that we know where to expect we need to go as far as the fire control room goes. But one of the first things, obviously, that first crew needs to do, assume command, start assigning companies. They need to go to the fire control room, locate the alarm, the panel, see if we have smoke or heat detectors activated, manual pull stations, water flow indications, and those kind of things, which we'll go through individually here. So one of the things you have to do, once again, you have the incident commander. One of your firefighters needs to go and look at the elevators. Needs to make sure the elevators have been recalled through the building alarm, make sure that, see if there's any smoke and fire conditions in the elevator shaft. Has the ventilation system started pressurizing the shafts? Are all the elevators in phase 1 in the lobby? One of the things we have to account for is all the lobbies and make sure, all the elevators and make sure that they're empty. One of the challenges that we've had on a number of high-rise fires throughout the years is elevators not being recalled and people being stuck in those elevators themselves, or even failing and being stuck on a different floor, maybe even with the fire floor itself. So we need to make sure all elevators are down and open and empty, and then make sure that it should all be like, say, phase 1 in the lobby. And we'll talk about the fire helmet indicator lights flashing. Some of the new elevators, and this, I haven't seen this on the older systems, but some of the brand new systems now, they'll have a little helmet, which we'll show you in a minute here, that if it's flashing, says that they have sensors that are both water sensors and smoke sensors and heat sensors in the elevator shaft. And if it's flashing, they're basically telling you not to use the elevators. But we'll talk about that in a second. Those are typically, I've only seen on the brand new buildings. Will fire inside the elevator door. Sometimes you see it on the outside, that this little fire helmet that may be flashing. One of your other firefighters need to start identifying stairwells. Just need to figure out how many you have, which have room marked with roof access. What are the smoke and fire conditions visible from the lobby when you open up the stairwell? Do you actually have smoke in the stairwell already, or is it clear as far as you can see? Which, if any, stairwells are being used for evacuations by the occupants, and which stairs have standpipes? That's one of the first things we have to do. Now, that may be easy on some of our residential structures where we have just maybe 2 stairwells in some of our smaller high rises. But for example, the State Farm building has 15 stairwells. So what do we do there? I mean, how do we clear all those stairwells? How long is it going to take us to get enough firefighters there? I mean, you may have to get another company at some point in time to help you try to locate the different stairwells and figure out which one you're going to use. So these are some of the things that come into play as a company officer when you're trying to decide which stairwell to find. The importance of going through the enunciator panel, hopefully finding getting the right stairwell identified to be able to gain access to our fire attack. So hopefully for that, at least the incident commander initially, and we're hoping that obviously a chief officer will arrive shortly to take that burden off your back here, and you can move into the building systems. But at least initially, you may have to come up with an incident action plan. That's going to be based upon obviously your size up, RP information. If they're telling you you've got a working fire on a certain floor, some of the fire alarm control panel information, whether you can use elevators or not, which stairwell you're using, what floor you're going to. Obviously, if you have a problem on the 3rd floor, it's going to be a lot easier to get access to. Still may have a problem with evacuation, but access to the fire itself on the 3rd floor will be a lot easier than something on the 17th floor, and then additional resources needed. So building system sector, we're going to talk about this and some of the challenges associated with this. This is one of those where I know in a lot of our drills, I'll go up and talk to the crews and they'd say, well, I can sit in this room here, but I have no idea what I'm looking at. I mean, I'm looking at these panels that have, screens, 15 different screens here that with all this gibberish on it about zone 5, suite 6, area 3, and you're going, I don't know what that is. I don't know what floor that is. I don't have any idea. So we'll talk about some of the importance of the building engineering stuff, but building system sector is a very challenging sector, and we're going to try to break it down a little bit for you so that at least you can know what to look for, what to talk about, what to think about, and the process as you manage the building system sector, at least until a chief officer arrives. So you can see some of the requirements here, and so I'm not going to go through each one of those because we'll get into the more specifics as we go through here, but basically you're responsible to interpreting all the information that comes out of and collecting resources and distributing resources out of the fire control room. Distributing keys and other things, fire pump and those kind of things we'll talk about more here. The building engineer. The building engineer is going to be invaluable to you if you happen to be the building systems guy or girl. This is the building systems engineer is the individual that has usually the majority of the information available to us. Will have the most experience and knowledge according to the systems that are available. And if you can grab that person, whoever that may be, and keep them with you at all times, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier as far as being able to work some of the systems or evaluate whether they're operational or not. The challenge you have is the building system engineer. A lot of times is only going to be there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So Murphy's Law is that it's going to be a Saturday at 11 o'clock at night, and you have at best an RP or maybe a security guard. So that's one of the challenges you have now. Sometimes these folks are also very educated, and they have the ability to provide that same information for you. But a lot of times, and they will call in typically that building engineer, so that the building engineer can be there and provide the information, the specific information you need. But you may have to rely on an RP, and that can be just the lady at the front desk, literally the lady at the front desk on a residential structure that's been working there for 3 weeks that has no idea. She's got a list of phone numbers and all of them are bad. So maybe a challenge for us, but we'll have to do the best we can. So our initial priority obviously is going to be to read the fire alarm panel. And this is what we need to find the history of the fire alarms for the incident. So we need to scroll back through the alarm indications to see if we can learn where the initial alarm indication came from, where the problem hopefully is identified where the problem started. This will give us the initial destination, hopefully, for the crew that's going to be making the fire attack. It typically is where we're going to send them. And then as a subsequent alarm sound, we need to relay that information as well to the command and crew. So if we have things that started on the 8th floor, and now we've got indications of smoke indications or water flow indications on the 9th floor, that's kind of information that needs to be relayed to fire command as well as even fire attack, so that they're aware that the fire is spreading, whether it be vertically or horizontally. And also do not silence the alarms. This is going to be one of those, at least for a while, that we're probably not going to silence the alarms because I can tell you from about every high-rise fire that I've ever been to, you get about 20% compliance on people getting out of the building. People just don't leave. We know that. Now, businesses are a little better because a lot of those folks then take their keys and then never come back. They go home for the day. But residential, I can tell you that we had a number of times at Manzanita Hall in the middle of the night that we got dispatched to fires there, and literally, there a couple of times they said, "Hey, let's go ahead and let's evacuate the building to make sure we've got a complete all clear." And at least 80% of the people were still in the rooms going, "What? But this thing goes off every week. We don't go out of here." So anyway, be prepared for if you have to evacuate an area to find people still inside the building, but don't silence the alarm. Fire alarm panels come in all shapes and sizes. So if you happen to be the building systems guy and they leave you in here, you're one of the company, maybe the engineer or firefighter, and you happen to look at this printout, you have any idea what this means? I don't. It's talking about here, activate P&L silence, diff, D, FFFFF, operation command, just different things here. The printout, you go, I have no idea what this means. You may get this, Tier 2, riser level 13, tamper, sprinkler, tamper, zone 6. A lot of it's gibberish. Now, some of these, the better high-rise, newer high-rises are buildings that are well-designed and managed. A lot of times you'll see a book next to it that'll have, literally either a book of maps and zones and those kind of things, or even a breakdown of what these screens mean. But you also have just as good a chance, unfortunately, going in here with a RP that has no idea what you're talking about, and you're trying to disseminate what this information means. Some of the panels are a little more simple. They may be a little bit easier for us to understand. Some are small. You may have to try to scroll back through here and try to figure out what this means here, where the last fire indication may be on this panel or this one here. So some of it may be a little bit easier. Other ones you're literally going to be and try to interpret hieroglyphics here. I don't know, but maybe a challenge for us. So we're starting to interpret the first thing we're doing. Like I say, we're trying to interpret the building systems to try to find out where the fire started. You have crew members checking for elevators. You have crew members working on stairwells. You're still incident command. Now you need to start gathering the keys. So hopefully you're going to find a key box somewhere in there in the fire control room. You're going to round up all the keys, the fobs, whatever you may have, and start bringing those to lobby. in addition to the phones, which we'll talk about in the next slide. One of the things you're going to find here, obviously, you look through here in the boxes that are here. Some of these are well broken down here as far as the numbers of keys, well identified keys as far as what's on the ring, what floors they service, or whatever else it may be. And then other situations, you may just have keys, a big key ring that looks like off the janitor's, the key fob or key ring that has 85 keys, and you have no idea what they are. The other challenge you have, as you can see, like in the upper left corners, there's 4 keys. Who gets the 4 keys? You got a second alarm inside the lobby, and you've got crews going up, and you got all kinds of assignments going on, and you're trying to figure out, everybody's asking for a key and a phone, and you're not sure who to give them to, which we'll talk about in a second. But just keep in mind that that may be a little bit of a challenge for us. The other thing I would tell you, inventory the keys, because I can tell you when the fire's over, these building managers and stuff are going to be hoping to get all those keys back, because they don't want to rekey 350 doors in a high-rise building because they can't verify that we have security for all their keys. So when you hand out the keys, make sure you write down somewhere, if you're in lobby, or if you're initially there as building systems, write down just on a piece of paper, hey, engine 201's got key set 4 or whatever, just so you have that in place. And then in theory, one set should remain in the building system sector. Now I would tell you, if you have the building engineer, he's probably going to have a set of keys himself, or the security guard may have a set of keys himself. And if it comes down to giving a set to, fire attack team versus one in the building systems, I'm probably going to give that set of keys up. There's another set of key rings you can see here. This one has a little bit of a description as to what's on the keys and what type of keys they have and things and that. The other thing you should do if you're early in the process is take a set of those keys and go see if they work. I know we probably had about a 60% chance of actually having our keys that were operational and accurate in the fires that I've been to. Actually, any kind of working incident. The key fobs, they change, the business managers, business owners changes, the suites change, all kinds of different things change. The next thing you know, the keys only fit about half the building or don't work at all. So I would tell you, take a look and see if the keys work, so that when you send them up there, that they'll hopefully have keys that will be functional. Gather the phones. That's the next thing that they're doing. You're gathering the keys, gathering the phones in there to take out to start distribution. So there's different types of, you can see the systems are how they're designed here. The phones are going to allow the crews to communicate with if radios become ineffective inside the building, and the crews can communicate with the building system sector via the red phones, and building system sector can relay that to the command. May decrease a little bit of radio traffic. Now understand that these phones are just literally like the old freaking string, and I mean this is what you got almost. It's basic. Like you plug in and I can talk to you up on the 15th floor. You can talk to me down here, but nobody else can hear me. I can't hear them. One of the other challenges you have with this, and I wish I knew more about these phones here as I've done a little research and stuff here, is basically you plug in your phone and it beeps downstairs in the fire command room. It'll beep or buzz or something else, and then they hit the button that says 13 intercom or whatever, and then you're able to talk to them on between the two. Now I'm not sure what happens whether you put the phone down each time you have to plug it in to get it to beep. I'm not sure. I haven't used them personally in the field to be able to know if anybody in the room knows exactly how they work. But I know that if you plug them in, you have the ability to communicate back and forth between floor and fire control room. And I think that in the fire control room, you have the ability to hit the buzzer and buzz the phone up on floor 12 or whatever, so that they can know that, hey, somebody's trying to get a hold of them. Typically, these the elevator, the phone connections are typically in the elevator lobby. And we'll show you what that looks like in a second. This is what you'll have when you plug your phone in upstairs. So as you plug that in, and you can talk in theory to fire control. Now, these work sometimes, they don't work sometimes. I'm not sure, once again, when you have 4 different phones trying to plug in at the same time, how that works, who gets priority and how that works. But just understand this is an option, and this is what you'll get. You'll get a set of keys and a red fire phone, hopefully, if you're making your way up to whatever floor you're going to be operating on. And have the ability to communicate back and forth. But they are there and they do work. It's just whoever's working in the systems may have a little work to do to try to figure out exactly how to communicate back and forth. Gather and distribute maps if indicated. This is a little bit of a challenge, as you can imagine. A lot of times they'll have one set of maps in these rooms, like the one that had this building here had a map that had all different floors here, but they just had one set. So you may hand out, I guess if you were handing out one to floor sector 9 and whatever else. Yeah. Whoever's on the phone, will you guys mute for us if you would? Sorry. So anyway, but this could be a good phone call. Can you guys mute if whoever's out? let's see if here, we'll check here in a second. Anyway, but you'll see the maps that we have here. You know, a lot of times you're going to see these big rolls of blueprints and stuff like that. Obviously not going to be very probably effective as far as to give to the fire attack sector initially, because they're not going to have the ability to carry those up and keep them intact and utilize them. Hey, whoever's online that's on a phone call, if you guys can mute here for a second. Let's see if we can who that is. Okay. All right. Okay, so, but anyway, if you look at the maps and distribution of maps, once again, this may become effective as we get a resource floor and some other things where we have time and maybe if we're 45 minutes into the fire, an hour into the fire, either down in the fire control room, somebody may break these out and have a little better breakdown as far as the floors and rooms of involvement and that kind of thing here, but may not be real effective for the initial companies going up to be able to utilize these. I would tell you from a recommendation perspective, and in most situations, you're probably going to be better off, especially like the fire attack team, is when you get to the floor below or so, is go out and look at the floor below, because it's probably going to look very similar to the next floor up in clean condition. So you're probably going to be better off in something like that. But anyway, if there are maps available and there's different sets of them, you can certainly distribute those as well. So your responsibility, once again, in the building system sector, you're going to distribute one set of keys and a set of phone, or sorry, a set of keys and a phone to the different sector officers. The next thing you're going to look for in the building systems is unlocking the doors. Depending on the type of structure, you don't see this a whole lot in residential, I think, as much as you do commercial, but you may have door lock control set up in there, and you can unlock all the doors or lock all the doors from that area. So obviously we're going to unlock all the doors so that our folks have access in and out of stairwells and in and out of doors as necessary. So electronic door locks, we're going to unlock the doors. Make sure we recall the elevators. Some of the systems have inside the, if you look inside the fire control rooms, have the ability to, excuse me, to recall the elevators there. You can see what floor all the elevators are on. You can see whether they're operational. You can control them all from that area. So if they haven't been recalled, make sure all the elevators are recalled and down and empty. Pressurizing the stairwells and other areas. This is going to be one of those things where hopefully you have the building engineer with you to be able to determine whether or not, and a lot of these systems are designed to work automatically based on smoke detectors and smoke removal. So one of the things you probably need to check as much as anything else is just to make sure they are operating and not in default mode or not shut off. And then from that perspective, you're probably going to need to work with the building engineer to determine which ones need to be pressurized if they're not operating already. If you need to manual override things or whatever, and you can coordinate also with the stair teams as to whether or not you have smoke in the stairwells to be able to evacuate that smoke as well. So some of these systems are very exotic. Some of them are very complex. You can look at some of these here, and this has got it's got a whole operational list of instructions over here to the right. It might take me 5 minutes to read through those, but anyway, you might be able to figure out the system. But just understand, if you have a building engineer, it's probably going to be much better off for you as being able to understand these. And once again, some of these high rises have tremendous systems, if they're operational, that can do a lot of things for us as far as removing smoke and pressurizing areas that need to be pressurized and exhausting other areas that don't. Confirm the generators are functioning if necessary. If we have power outages or areas that we have compromise of power, every high rise is going to have some type of generator in it. It's just a matter of how big and how many. So it may be something, once again, if I'm working with the building engineer, that I may need to start the generators. Confirm the fire pump is operational. Well, if you're like me, I know every one of these that I went and looked at, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I don't know what to turn on, what not to turn on. You got giant freaking fire pumps next to it, huge electrical panels next to it, and I'm trying to figure out which button I'm going to put to turn this thing on, or set the. So anyway, being aware of this, of not only having the systems and having a building engineer with you if necessary. If the system is not operational, typically they come on and operate appropriately. But there are times where they fail, and it may be something you have to do a little troubleshooting. You need to go out and just see if the power's on, see if it's shut off, see if it looks like it's operational, see if the pressure, for example, on the bottom here, as the gauges on either side of the valve here, is one lower than the other. Does that mean we don't have water coming in from the street side, or is there not water coming out of the pump side? But just some of the things we need to look at and be familiar with, because obviously if the fire pump is not operational, we've got problems, and that's probably one of the reasons that the fire is continuing to build. And we'll talk more about that certainly as well. So utilize the public address system. This is another thing that building systems does. We're going to decide whether it be just by yourself or depending on what the situation is, you may get on and tell people, hey, evacuation, all units or all occupants need to evacuate the structure and please utilize stairwell 1 or the east stairwell to evacuate the building if you've determined which one's going to be the attack stairwell versus evacuation stairwell. That may also be in conjunction with command. Command may come back to you and say, hey, we need you to get on the PA and tell all residents above the 10th floor to evacuate in place, to stay in place. And just or everybody below floor 10 stay in place, everybody above floor 10 evacuate the structure or whatever. So some of that information may come based upon the findings you have or what you've seen on arrival, and then other information may come from command or somebody else as far as a direction as to what information you need to get out on a PA system. In theory, I guess you could also use it to advise firefighters if you were evacuating the floor or something of that nature and weren't able to communicate with them, because communications is a huge problem in high rises, that you could probably even get on and tell crews that, hey, we're evacuating the structure, I guess, if you had to, as a worst case scenario. So fire attack teams too. So we've already went through now the first arriving company. We've talked about incident command, and we've talked about building systems. So that first company is busy. I mean, that you can see that, I mean, all the things that need to take place with that first crew of 4 is going to be incredibly busy. But if you have a list of things to do and hopefully have a plan, hopefully you can address what we have going on until a chief officer comes and replaces you. So now the second company arrives and gets assigned fire attack stair team. This is a team, not a sector. Typically, it's going to be our second team in, our second unit in, if we can get there. You can see the responsibilities: pump the FDC, and then assemble the stairwell team. And this is a rapid ascent team. This one of the things I can't emphasize enough on this responsibility is that we need you to move quickly and get into the building fast and get up the stairs quickly to identify our fire floor, to make sure we have a clear stairwell to operate in, and get ourselves into a position to be able to operate successfully. So this is very important and it's important for all of our crews to move quickly and move toward the building with a purpose. But this is one that's important to get them in there and get them in there soon. But the engineer obviously is set up, and we'll talk about their responsibilities outside, and then we establish our like I say, our rapid ascent team. So we'll get into the specifics on the pump and the FDC, but the stairwell team, once again, they do not bring hose line. They are not part of the fire attack. You can look at it here. The equipment, we'll go through this equipment just because it's very important. Bring at least 1 spare SCBA bottle per crew member. Make sure you bring your set of keys and your par tags, a set of irons, bolt cutters, PW can, flashlights, obviously, and TIC, cell phone, and a rabbit tool if available. I know a lot of our agencies don't carry these or don't bring them up, but it's another option for us if you're trying to get off the floor through a metal door in a stairwell in the smoke or something else, and you're running out of air. Having the ability to get in and out of a floor quickly and efficiently may be important, but we also know that we're going to have our hands full. So first thing for the engineer, responsibility: support the building's water supply. Connect to all the FDCs. So this is one of the first things we have to do. Some of our buildings have large diameter Storts fittings, and others have just 2.5 inch inlets. We need to connect to all of them. Now, one of the things, and we'll talk about this in a second here, is does your engineer or your temp engineer know which one to pump? Seems simple, but I personally have witnessed some pretty interesting things out there. But these here are fire pump test valves. All the valves here. And sometimes I'll see people have got hooked into all 5 of these or all 7 of these, and you're going, what are you doing? I'm pumping them all. And you go, well, that's really not what it is. The ones with the valves on them are actually designed to test the fire pump on they're actually discharge versus intakes. Now, I did read last night, the other day, for Saturday, whatever it was, anyway, that in theory, if you have a standpipe system that's down and a certain type of valve, that you could actually pump back through these into the fire pump if your standpipe system didn't work. But I would just tell you for now, to not confuse you, just pump the sprinkler system. Just pump the inlets you have here. Obviously, you can see the Siamese here that we're connecting into. These are pump test valves, and don't hook into those when you're pumping the system. Some FDCs are marked better than others. One of the nice things that Tempe did is they keep it simple for firefighters. They got labeling on them and tells you exactly how much to pump, what building they're pumping, and all that kind of stuff, which is really nice. Because you can imagine pulling up on something that has 4 or 5 of these outside, especially one of these large complexes, and you're going, which one feeds which building? I have no idea. You're going to pump 17 different inlets here as you're trying to figure out which one is for that building. So hopefully they're marked well, and you can figure out. Some are obvious. If you only have one building, probably you're going to be pretty obvious as to which one you need to pump, but just make sure you can do that. Now, the other thing, this is a big thing to understand also, we don't pump the fire. If the fire pump is working, we don't pump the sprinkler systems because they have a clapper valve. So if it's working and operational and it's pumping at 200 PSI, we're gonna have to pump at 205 to get even past the clapper valve. So you need to be hooked in, need to be ready to support the system. And if the system's not working, we need to pump that system. But to sit there and basically just to pump, you're pumping at 200, the system's pumping at 200, you're basically just turning water until you're damaging the truck or it overheats. But we need to be set up in place so that we can either pump it if necessary, if it's not providing enough pressure or water, or if it fails, that we can be operational. But just understand the way it's designed. If the fire pump is working on these, especially these bigger high rises, that you're not going to, and you're going to have to pump pretty hard to freaking get past what they're doing until you're basically not adding to the system at all. Some of this stuff here is going to be over my head. This is some of the stuff came from different documents that I've found here. But we may have challenges trying to get, for example, Desert Sam. They said that to actually pump Desert Sam system, you need 265 PSI. I'm personally not, I haven't been an engineer for 34 years, so that's not my specialty, but obviously going to be a challenge for us. Do we have hose that can pump at 265 that were for a continuous amount of time? Do we have engine companies now, do we need to have pump in series or something else so we actually to get 265 PSI for a sustained period of time? So these are things just to think about and consider. We also need to be prepared so that if we find a dry hydrant or if we find a challenge with the standpipe fitting itself, the fire department connection, if it's got damage to it, we have the speed swivels on battalions. We have speed swivels, right, in our system here, for damaged standpipe systems. Okay. Anyway, I know Tempe carries them on the battalions, that they have the ability to replace a damaged fire department connection. But anyway, so just be prepared if we. What's that? Okay, in the high-rise bag. Okay. So, okay, so but just have a plan for plan B, B, C, and D if we have a water supply issue, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes on some of the future slides as well. These are some challenges you have. You look at some pressures that you're going to need for, this is from NFPA 14, but, we have buildings that are 26 to 30 floors, 250 PSI. We're looking at 275 for floors 31 through 35. Phoenix has plenty of those buildings, so we need to be prepared, but utilize a approved pump discharge pressures per your department's SOPs. These are, we need to make sure that we're familiar with that and understand what we need to pump out if we do. This one I can't emphasize enough for us. Bring your passport. Basically it's your ticket to the show here. I can tell you that if you have a working high-rise incident, if lobby's doing their job, they're not going to let you go loft until you have a passport in hand here. So, and because your ability to park next to a high-rise may be somewhat difficult, you don't want them to have to send you back out to your truck if you show up without your passport. So bring it with you. In theory, you're not supposed to go above the IDLH and work without your passport in place, and it's for accountability perspective. So make sure you have it with you, because I know that in one of the recent high-rise events that they had in Tempe, they had to send 2 or 3 companies back to get theirs, their passports, and so make sure you bring it with you. So fire attack team now. So we've split it off. You got your engineer outside pumping these standpipe, or at least setting up to pump the standpipes. You're going to come in through the lobby with your air bottles, irons, and PW can, pick up your fire phone, set of keys. Hopefully they've identified already the attack stairwell, which is going to be the stairwell closest to the fire-involved apartment or office or area. A compartment, whatever that may be. And then so you're going to grab all your stuff, go in the stairwell, and as quickly as possible, make your rapid ascent to the top of the building. Check all floors. When I say check all floors, it may be as simple as looking through the glass panel on each one of the doors if the floor is clear. If you have a center hallway and you can see all the way to the other side and it's clear, we're going to continue up until obviously we find the fire floor. But at least open the door and peek. You don't want to, because once again, these systems do fail, and because we have challenges with the stack effect and we have other things that come into play, you may start encountering smoke before the fire floor. Or the fire floor may be, once again, they may have system failure where the fire is actually on the 8th floor, but the smoke indication was showing 9 because there's some system problems on the 8th and those kind of things. So I would tell you, at least take a peek in the each floor as you go up. And it may just be as simple, once again, as looking through the window or opening the door enough to see that the fire is not in that floor or is not a problem. Once you get to the fire floor, we need to make sure we confirm the sprinkler isolation valve is in the open position. That's one reason that you may have a fire on that floor, an active fire on that floor, is because the sprinkler valve and that isolation valve is closed on that floor. Make sure it's in the open position. And then you're going to work with systems, obviously, to maintain smoke-free environment. So if you start encountering smoke on the floor, one of the floors as you're going up, get a hold of systems and see if they can pressurize that stairwell for you, or remove that exhaust that stairwell. And then if you happen to be in the stairwell that actually has a roof hatch, you'll be responsible for controlling that roof hatch at some point in time if that becomes part of the ventilation plan. So you get your side now. You need to identify that floor out your stair. So if his fire attack team is going to be, stair 15 is going to be the fire attack stairwell. Make sure that command knows that, and all crews coming in know that that's going to be the fire attack stairwell. The other challenge you have is this is one of the buildings they have in Tempe. Some of the ones as soon as you come into the stairwell to go up, is you encounter a door like this. And you go, how do I get through here? So if you don't have a key fob or something else, you're going to spend the next 5 minutes trying to get through this door, unless somebody's coming down and opens it for you. Probably try to get through this door to get into the stairwell to start going up. So just understand, especially these some of the commercial buildings that have high security, whether it be proprietary information or some of those kind of things, you may encounter something like this on multiple levels. But this is what on the first floor you encounter. You can get out of it from the stairwell coming down, but coming in is going to be very difficult. So having that set of keys be very important for you here. So you get into the stairwell. Do you have a clean stairwell, a dirty stairwell? And hopefully you can see this on the screen down, if you're online here. But this becomes a challenge for us. If we get to the 5th floor and we start encountering smoke in the stairwell, that's going to create some problems for us. And you can imagine, because now I got to go on air, right? So once I go on air, now my time is limited as the amount of time I can spend in that stairwell, and before I can get hopefully all the way to the top and clear the stairwell before I run out of air. So we need to start considering those things. And also we need to consider at that point in time, now we may have victims and other challenges here if we have a contaminated stairwell. So obviously if we have a clear stairwell, things can be good. You're probably going to find once you get above the fire floor that you're going to have some leakage into it. So you may have somewhat of a contaminated stairwell. And then you have the potential challenge for victims and other things in there. Now I tell you also that we need to obviously have a plan in place so that if we start running out of air, when we start getting close to our bells ringing here, is can we get off on a clean floor and change bottles? And that may be as simple as just deciding, making sure that all the doors that are unlocked, that we can get in and off a floor easily. And if that's the case, we can probably work till the bell starts to ring and get off the floor, get onto a clean floor, change our bottles out, and then continue our operation. But also just understand that that we have the ability, in most of these high rises, unless you have multiple floors with heavy smoke involvement, that if we get into a problem, we could work our way around to the other stairwell and work our way down. Hope it was clear, but not guaranteed. So keep that in mind. Same problem here, clean stairwell, dirty stairwell. I mean, if we get to the point where we've got heavy smoke, now also consider what happens if we get zero visibility in the stairwell. If somebody's propped open that door, now our challenge going from there to the roof is going to be a huge challenge for us, because now we're have limited visibility. Now, obviously, you have a small confined area, so it's not like you're searching a large open space. So I mean, obviously, you're just in a 4-foot wide stairwell or 5-foot wide stairwell, whatever it may be, but still can be a challenge for us as far as now trying to find victims. The victims we find are probably going to be somewhat some smoke inhalation, whether it be unconscious or conscious, or certainly compromised in some point at that point in time. And we're going to literally have to search as we go. And we're definitely going to be in a situation where we're going to have to find a safe refuge to change out bottles ourselves. So we talked about confirming the sprinkler isolation valve is open. Now as we peek in through the windows, this is what our options are. Obviously, if we look in there and we see the one on the left, I would say we're not on the fire floor yet. Or if we are, it's confined to the apartment or office involved probably, and we'll work our way from there. If you look through and you see this, obviously we know we've located the fire floor probably or something from that perspective, and we know we've arrived at the area we're going to start doing our fire attack as far as that goes. Same thing here, clean hallway, dirty hallway, right? These are huge differences as far as our ability, whether we're going to make entrance as the stairwell attack team. Are we going to make entrance and go check and see if we can identify where the fire is? If the fire's on the left, we're probably going to take a look at the fire. If we open the door and we have this here from the fire attack stairwell team, we're probably not. This is one we're going to keep the door closed, identify that the fire floor is going to be whatever floor that is to command, and we're going to continue to search and clear the stairwell to the roof of the structure. Now, but if we walk in and we look through the window and we see this, the one on the right here, now that's maybe something a little bit different for us, because now we're going, okay, we got a little bit of a dirty hallway. We've got an active incident on this floor, but it's
not heavy fire. We don't have heavy fire. We don't have fire smoke to the floor, zero visibility. We've got an incident obviously that's occurring in here on the second door on the left, but we need to figure out what that is. So this is where we talk about the stair team now will make entry into this floor, mask up, go to that door, tick the door and stuff and see whether we have active fire in there. If it looks like we're attainable from the standpoint, we will pop that door open. And if it looks like the fire is small, and when I say small, we're talking about, dishwasher fire, computer fire, something like that, where if it's small enough that we can go inside and extinguish with a PW can, we will do that. Go inside, the stairwell team will go inside, extinguish the fire, call command back, control the door, control the smoke expansion or the contamination of the floor, call command back and give them an update on what you did. Now, I would tell you, because I love firemen to death, but I've also literally personally seen a firefighter take a PW can into a working commercial fire because they were the ladder truck with that dry ladder taking a PW can to a commercial fire. So you can imagine, and this is a working fire, that I know sometimes we're a little optimistic because of what we think we can control with a PW can. So I would tell you, use caution. If we've got an active working fire, we've got cabinets burning, we've got other things that may be burning, we need to make sure that we exercise discretion, keep the door closed, maintain door control, advise command that we have a working fire in whatever apartment or door or office unit it is, and return to the stairwell and continue to clear the stairwell. So some of the transmissions that the stair team will get back to command. You're going to relay findings that you have command. We talk about no good news reporting, and I can tell you for anybody that's worked a significant incident out, there's a lot of radio traffic that's going to occur in a high-rise fire is going to be nothing short of very difficult to gain access to radio time. So you don't need to call every floor you go to and say floor 6 is clear, floor 7 is clear, stairwell team to command, go ahead. Floor 8 is clear, copy that. We don't need that. But at some point in time, if you've cleared floors 1 through 10, I might give them one report to say, hey, we've cleared 1 through 10. We're continuing to work our way up here. Something like that might be appropriate. But limit your good news reporting because there's going to be too much radio traffic probably to do some of that kind of stuff anyway. Another challenge you have, and the people have asked me this a lot of times, they go, what if I'm a stairwell team and I come into a locate a victim? What do I do? Because we're talking about the importance of your rapid ascent team clearing that stairwell so we can open the stairwell and begin our fire attack. Now we've located a victim. What do we do? Well, I can tell you, as this may seem a little bit harsh, but because of the responsibility, we need to move them off that floor. We need to move them off the floor, but we're going to leave them there. Depending on the situation, a lot of this is kind of one of those things, depending on how many crews we have available, how significant the incident is, a lot of those things. But if we have a significant working fire, the ability to move one person, if we locate one victim and that crew now takes that victim down 11 floors to the first floor, we've just eliminated all the things we can probably address from there up. We may have 10 more people above there that are salvageable if we can get to them quickly and get them off that floor versus that one person that may or may not be. So as harsh as it sounds, it's kind of like triage on a major medical. The indications are what we should do: pull them off the contaminated area into onto a floor that's hopefully not contaminated, open their airway, get back in the stairwell, continue our search to the top of the building, and then communicate that information to command. Hey, we've moved a patient off a critical patient off of floor 9 onto the floor itself, out of the stairwell into the floor. You'll need to send somebody up here as soon as possible to get this person, and then continue your search, and all the way to the top of the building. It sounds harsh and stuff, and I know our priority on fires is rescue and is our top priority, but you need to understand it's one of those things like triaging, is that we may have multiple patients and other things that if we can put the fire out, we may save 50 people versus taking one person down, and that person may or may not survive, and the delay in our fire attack may create challenges and additional injuries and casualties as a result. So we talk about this, we talk about making that fire attack, and this is the same thing we talked about a minute before. If you actually get on the fire floor and you'd have a minimal smoke or whatever, we can go and make that fire attack with a PW can if it's appropriate. Once you get to the top of the stairwell, so you're the stairwell team, now you get to the top of the stairwell, everything's clear. You need to report that to command, and then what is designed to happen is basically you're going to stay at that top floor, get into an area of refuge out of the stairwell itself, onto the floor itself, and then you remain in that area in case they need you to either open a roof hatch or continue to do additional stairwell operations. But get out of the stairwell so that the fire attack team can open that and make a fire attack without causing risk to the stair team. Okay, let's take about maybe 5 minutes or so to take a quick break here. We've been going for a little while. Let's take a break and then we'll come back and continue. So let's go. We'll come back at say 9:33. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I can hear it pretty good. You hear it, Paulie? Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, please. Much better, yes.
Shut this off.
Okay.
All we gotta do is push and hold and it'll turn on, but
Okay.
I'll leave it here as a backup.
Go ahead over there. I think I'm pretty confident. Yeah, I think we're good now. Thank you, Paulie.
So you're still live, if you want to use that.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We got, I know today and I apologize in advance. This is a lot of material to cover, but this will probably be the only time that we cover Highrise and from Tactical Tuesday perspective this year and probably even next year. So there's a lot of material to cover, but please bear with us. And we're going to try to get provide as much information as we can for our company officers to be as familiar as they can be for coming into a Highrise incident. So now we move on. We've talked about the first company in, we've talked about building systems, we've talked about stairwell attack team. Now we're going to talk about the fire attack team. So this is typically going to be our third, fourth, and fifth companies coming in as we look at this. So you can see that if things work in the way we hope, the next three companies come in. Ideally, it'd be 2 engines and a ladder, but we'll take whatever 3 companies are coming in. They're going to come in the front door, obviously, grab their fire phone, map, and keys. We're going to talk about equipment here in just a minute as far as the amount of equipment they need to bring with them. The attack team leader determines the ascent order there. They communicate with as they work their way up the on-deck floor and some other stuff here as we go through here. So we look at the equipment. We talk about the fire attack team leader is going to manage the sector company work cycles, accountability, air levels, and those kind of things. And then we're going to talk about the responsibilities of hand lines as far as whether we're going to deploy 1, 2, or 3, or all 3, and the order that's going to occur. So the first thing we're going to talk about, I'm going to let Chief Lachlan actually talk about this here as well here. But the first thing we're going to talk about here is the Highrise plan. Some people may wonder, and I get this question all the time, why don't we just go up and put the fire out? That's what we've done for 100 years. Why don't we just go up and put the fire out? And I'm going to let Chief Lachlan kind of explain a little bit of that. Okay. Hang on, we're trying to, sorry, we had a little mic problem here.
Test. Can we hear okay now, guys?
Okay, can somebody unmute for a second and see Chief Lachlan, go ahead and get started. We had a problem with the.
Hello again. That sounds way better.
You guys hear Chief Lachlan?
Hello.
Can somebody unmute for a second if you happen? I know.
They're all listening to the fire, sir.
Yes, I know. Okay, Chief Lachlan's going to repeat that. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Just real quick, one of the feedback we've gotten as we've been doing some high-rise training in Mesa is the time it takes to get the 3rd, 4th, and 5th units to the fire floor. Keep in mind, your first unit, we're going to have to get that person to the building system to assess what's going on with the fire alarm panel, and get an idea of what we have. Your second crew is going to get up that stairwell quickly. If they're checking the fire floors, they can affirm what we have, or if it's incipient, they can use the PW can to knock it down. And your 3rd, 4th, and 5th units all should be on the call almost simultaneously with your first 2 units anyways. These high rises are always in your densely populated areas, whether downtown Phoenix, downtown Tempe, downtown Mesa. You're going to have your resources there all essentially the same time. Currently, of course, we do a 3-in-1 dispatch, and that's 4 units. We're looking at increasing ours to add a 5th unit on the initial dispatch to match Phoenix Fire. But with the prevalence of our units adding to fires anyways, you should have 7 units on scene in the first couple minutes. So that might be resolved. But really the best way to get quicker is your 3rd, 4th, and 5th units are going to be your attack team. They're going to get all their good stuff and head up the stairs. And what we've noticed in the different drills we've done, I know Tempe had a pretty exhaustive drill they did in the new Mirabella down there, is the delay is from parking brake set to getting to the lobby. And then, of course, lobby to ascending the stairs. So really the best way to get to the fire quicker under this model, which is a good model, is just to know where your equipment is, be proficient getting all the stuff off your truck, loading up everybody, practice that, and then just the transit to the building isn't going to be that long. And then of course, just, doing stairs on as a part of your physical routine to make sure you're in good enough shape to get up to the 9th, 10th, 20th floor if you have to. So what we found is it does take a little bit of time, but you're getting all 5 units there pretty much at the same time. So it's really not a delay because we're waiting until the 3rd, 4th, and 5th unit. So with that, I'll hand it back to Patrick.
And that's what we've found, at least the high-rise fires that I've been to. By the time you arrive on the scene, I mean, multiple units are starting to back up. There's actually typically more units on the scene than you can give assignments to, at least initially, because as Chief Lachlan talked about, these are typically in our core areas with a lot of our high density of our units, and so not going to be unusual to have a lot of units arrive quickly. So this isn't really a delay. I know there was a lot of discussion and argument back and forth during the design and review of the high-rise plan, but for the most part, as we talk to other agencies from other states and people that actually fight high-rise fires on a somewhat regular basis, that the time you spend clearing the stairwell and addressing the building systems is going to be worth it. And once again, minimal if any delay, because once again, the companies 3, 4, and 5 will be assembling equipment and moving in within the next minute or two anyway. So this is why we do this. This is why we have a plan, and that we can have an organized plan as we address a very complex situation and try to handle it as best we can. So you can see the things that this is the reasons that we do what we did. So fire attack team is assigned by obviously command, led by the 3rd company officer. That's the initial plan. That's how it's designed to be. Enter through the lobby with the appropriate equipment. We're going to show that in just a second. Meet at the fire control room for a set of keys and a phone. You're going to have basically your 3 companies that are going to consist of the attack team leader, which is going to be the sector officer, the nozzle team, and the water supply team is how they break it down, which the water supply team includes the water control officer, which is typically an engineer. Here's one of the things that has created a little bit of concern and discussion, but we've also learned some valuable lessons from it. Wait in the lobby until all crews are there to ensure the required equipment is going aloft. The problem we had in some of the drills that we did in Tempe is as one company came in, all 3 of the first attack teams were arriving, and they obviously there's differences as far as transit time between people rounding up equipment and making it into the lobby, is that they were sending that as companies that come in, just send them right. The first company would grab, they'd be the attack team leader, grab a set of keys and a phone and just start working their way up. Second team would come in and they had a set of equipment. They go, what did the first team bring? And they go, I don't know. So they either brought the same amount of equipment or they say, hey, leave our hoses here because I think they brought hose. And so what we found is that we'd get up there to the fire floor and then we'd have just one standpipe kit, or we would have 6 lengths of hose and not 8 lengths of hose, or we'd have 4 lengths of Tempe hose, which isn't compatible with 2 lengths of Mesa hose, or whatever it is. And so we found that we're better off actually waiting that extra minute or so, once again reinforcing what Chief Lachlan said about hustling between the time we set the air brakes and get the assignment and making our way to lobby. Getting those 3 units in there and actually being able to confirm that, okay, we've got, we got enough bottles of air for everybody here. We did the math. Somebody's got enough air bottles. We've got at least two standpipe kits. We've got at least 8 lengths of hose. We've got at least 1 set of irons or whatever. And okay, let's go ahead and go. And then the fire attack team leader will determine the ascent level or the ascent order for the crews going up. Now, one of the challenges you have is, just like you can imagine here, the difference between some of the folks in this room going up to the 15th floor and me going up to the 15th floor may be a little bit different. Some folks are obviously in better shape than others, and we realize that, but that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for you as a company officer. You have to manage. Are your crew members in condition that we can make it all the way to the 15th floor without stopping? Or are you going to have to stop every 5 floors and take a 30-second break for people to catch their wind or whatever else? So you're going to have to be familiar with that. But I would also tell you, don't just say, hey, we'll see you up at the 15th floor and take off. Because, we don't want to have a Mayday situation, a medical Mayday situation, when somebody comes up from the next company comes up and says, hey, who's this unconscious firefighter on floor 13 or whatever. So we have to maintain accountability for our folks, but I can't reinforce enough, as Chief Lachlan talked about, the importance of maintaining good physical conditioning, so that if we get dispatched to these type of incidents and we have to take the stairwells all the way to the 15th or 18th floor, that we're not going to become a part of the problem versus a part of the solution. So we're going to go ahead and get all of our crews together. We're going to start the ascent up to the fire floor. This is the equipment that we should have. We talk about the 1 spare bottle. Minimum is the 8 lengths of hose with 2 nozzle sets and 2 standpipe kits, so that we can put 2 hand lines in place up there. We talk about radios, flashlights, bolt cutters. Some have bolt cutters in, some recruit or agencies have bolt cutters in their standpipe kits, some do not. I would tell you to consider bolt cutters, and we'll show you why in just a second. PW can, TICs, cell phone, pike pole. We'll talk about cell phones and communications in just a minute, but just understand once again that Tempe thread is not compatible with Phoenix thread, which is not compatible with Mesa thread. Now we do have adapters, but just to keep that in mind that may come into play if you get up there, because they're not going to be able to just hook in direct. So make sure you have everything with you as you go, because obviously if you get to the 17th floor and realize, hey, we don't have a standpipe kit, how long is that going to delay? We talk about trying to hustle in and making a quick attack on the fire. And now if you have to send somebody down or send somebody up to get a standpipe kit to the 15th floor or whatever, or 16th floor, is that going to take us another 10 minutes in the delay in the process? So make sure you have, that's what we talk about, making sure you have everything going up. Standpipe kit, just to give you a general idea of what's in some of the standpipe kits. I think this is similar to what Mesa has. I think this is Gilbert's kit here. Anyway, but here's one of the reasons we take bolt cutters. Probably in some cities you don't have necessarily any chains or protective devices on your standpipes, but any place in Tempe does, because it's certainly any place that has students in Tempe does, because otherwise people open the valves, they stuff junk in the valves and everything else in here, so, or break them off and steal them. So just a consideration for having a bolt cutter with you when you make your way to the top. So now the fire attack team has to decide the method of ascent. Do we take the stairs or do we take the elevators? And it's a big decision to make, because obviously, if we're going to the 17th floor and we take the stairs, that's going to be a lot of work. If we take the elevator and go to the 12th floor and walk up from there, it's certainly going to give us a little bit of a break, but we also need to make sure that the elevator is secure and the elevator is safe to travel in. So that's one of the decisions you'll have to make coming into the process. If we decide to take elevators, now I would tell you the stair team obviously needs to take the stairs and work their way up, but if we decide to take elevators, anything below 10th floor, we don't use the elevator. So if you're below 10 and below, we tell you to just take the stairs. Anything 10 above, we say elevators may be considered. And this is one of those where, as part of our discussion with the ROC committee and others, that we said, well, if you go into the 25th floor, does it make sense to, if we've got a clear operating elevator, to go all the way to the 25th floor with all the equipment and stuff by stairs? So that's a judgment call you have to make, obviously, as a crews, but for the most part, the valley has decided that elevators can be used for that situation, as long as they're phase 2 firefighter feature set up and that they're prepped in safety. Now, this isn't an elevator class. I know Chief Alexander is going to put together an elevator class for Highrise, and there's a lot of things that come into play with an elevator that we can't get into here, because this class will last 6 hours versus the 3 that it's already going to last. But we talk about making sure the elevator's prepped in safety. We talk about making sure that if you have the newer elevators with the flashing helmet, which means that either a smoke detector, water detector, or heat detector is operational, which means the elevator shaft is compromised. But certainly we can try to use a flashlight to look up in the elevator shaft, but how far even with a good LED flashlight, how far can we see up in a 15 or 18 floor shaft? We can see a little ways. We can certainly hopefully look for water and stuff, but just understand that we need to be careful. But if we do take the elevator, once again, it has to be in fireman feature, set up in phase 2. We want to get no more than 1 crew and equipment in at a time to make sure you don't overload. They recommend stopping every 5 floors to look and confirm that the elevator is functioning correctly, and also look at the floor layout so you see what you expect. Stop a minimum of 2 floors below the fire floor and walk up. And then you have to be sure, at least 100% sure that you can control the elevator, otherwise don't use it. I'll tell you a little story time with Pat here. Way back in the day, 100 years ago, I was a company officer in Tempe. Our first due was Manzanita Hall. We get dispatched for a fire on the 13th floor at the time, middle of the night kind of fire. And so we arrived first. Back in the day, I assumed command and I sent my crew with the ladder company to begin the attack team. This is before the 7-unit deployment model. My crew and the ladder crew goes inside. Shortly thereafter, the battalion gets on the scene. He assumes command, tells me to join my crew. So I get out, hustle, get all my gear, and start heading into the lobby. We get inside, and so I go, man, my crew's going up there. I had my engineer bump up to captain, and said, hey, you guys go ahead and head up to the fire floor with the ladder truck. And so I get inside, and I go, crud, they're already up in the stairs. So I get in the stairs, and I'm hustling, trying to catch up to my crew. I get in the stairwell, and I go, fudge, man, these guys are moving. I can't even see them. They're already moving. So I'm scrambling. I'm getting up there. I'm huffing and puffing. I'm about to die, and it was a lot better shape than I am now. But anyway, I work my way up, and I get to about the 6th floor, and they go, hey, this is engine 271. We're on the 13th floor. We've got looks like a small fire in a trash can up here and stuff, and we got smoke on the floor. And I'm going, oh, geez, man, these guys are freaking tough. I get up to the 13th floor, and I'm huffing and puffing and going, fudge, man, whew. And so, you know, they go, I don't hear anything about it. Well, a little bit later, my engineer sheepishly comes up to me and says, hey, yeah, we decided to take the elevator, but we thought we would take it up to like the 8th floor. We thought we'd take it to like the 8th floor. And he said, we hit the 8th floor and it went right past the 8th floor, went right to the 13th floor. He said, we couldn't stop the elevator. We didn't do it in fireman feature. He said, we couldn't stop anything. It opens up on the 13th floor. We're all thinking we're going to die here and stuff. But anyway, so I'm thinking that these guys are just hustling. Unfortunately, they chose to take the elevator without fireman feature. And this situation, it took them right to the fire floor. Fortunately, the floor wasn't burning, and so it was a little lesson learned for all of us here about being careful about elevators and stuff. But just understand stuff can fail and problems can occur, and so we need to make sure that the elevator is operating correctly. We need to make sure that, you know, that the fireman featured the door opens and closes before I leave floor 1. I'm going to make sure everything opens and closes correctly, and that everything is operational before we take the elevator or the stairs, whichever one's going to be appropriate, and that's a decision you have to make as the fire attack team. Okay, so as we're making our way up to the floor, obviously we're going to establish an on-deck location, typically 2 floors below the fire, and notify command of that on-deck floor. We're going to confirm the fire department or office if the floor is clear. So if we get up there and we look in the window and the floor is clear, then we're going to confirm that the floor is clear. Then we're going to confirm whether or not we have an active fire in the office or apartment or whatever it may be. We're going to assemble our hose line, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We're going to contact, before we open the door onto the floor to make our fire attack, we need to make sure that the stair team, the attack stair team, and make sure they're out of the stairwell. Because the last thing we want to do is open the stairwell or open the door to the floor, contaminate the stairwell, and still have the attack team somewhere in that stairwell, or we haven't cleared that stairwell yet and we contaminate it. When we're ready to make the attack, if we have a dirty floor and an active fire on the floor, we need to notify command that we're ready to make entry and that the stair team is aware and secure. And then once we identify the fire floor itself, we go from fire attack team to now whatever that sector is. If I'm on floor 15, I'm now sector 15 from fire attack team. One of the things that they have strongly suggested is, and this is one of those from active fires from different agencies, is they tell you to provide a CAN report as soon as possible. So if you get inside and you have heavy smoke and heat in the hallway, if you get to the apartment and you have a well-involved apartment, make sure you relay that information so command knows what they're dealing with. Also monitor for wind-driven conditions. I know FDNY and a couple other places have had some fatalities over the years when we had windows fail and created some flow paths between the stairwell, the window, and the hallway with firefighters getting stuck in between. And then obviously request what resources are needed. Attack lines. This is one of those that's been also a little bit debated from a Valley perspective as to how many lines need to be put in place before we make entry. A lot of that's going to depend on what you encounter. If you get up there and you've got light smoke in a hallway, certainly putting 1 2.5 in place, attack line in place is probably sufficient as we build the other ones with additional crews that are arriving. If you get to the fire floor and you have heavy smoke and fire conditions, we're probably going to be better off waiting until we get at least a backup line in place before we make entry into the fire floor. The thing we need to understand is that this is not like a commercial or residential structure. You don't have the ability to jump out the window or climb out a window or something of that nature if we get in trouble. Help's probably going to be a long ways away and a long time away. At this point in time, we've got 3 companies that are working their way up for the fire attack team. Our 7-unit deployment model, even though we'll have additional units arriving, the other crews coming up to build another attack line maybe 6 to 10 minutes away. So you need to be in a position that you can protect your crews and provide the fire attack necessary before you make entry. So the plan shows that we're going to build 1 line initially, get it ready to go, put a backup line in place, and then a 3rd line stairwell protection line that will be put in place as additional crews arrive and put that in service. So we need to determine the type of hose stretch before we make our fire attack. Obviously, if the hallway is untenable, that means with smoke and fire, obviously we're going to utilize the stairwell stretch. So that means we're going to keep the line, we're going to build the line in the stairwell, open the fire floor, the door to the fire floor, and then drag it down to the involved apartment or office and make our attack. That's going to take a little more work. Obviously, if we have the stairwell stretch is going to take a lot more crews than it will for a hallway stretch, just because of the number of pinch points and other things. So you're probably going to need 2 crews to effectively move 1 2.5-inch hand line in for an attack with a stairwell stretch. But the hose should be charged prior to opening the stairwell door into the hallway. Don't take a dry line in there and find yourself getting into a bind if you have a flashover condition. If the hallway is tenable and there is no smoke or fire, if you have door control, possible to utilize this hallway stretch, a little bit easier from the perspective of moving it into the involved apartment or office space. And that's just, once again, if we have a tenable hallway, and we won't get into the specific hose legs and stuff, but you can see the hallway stretch here versus the stairwell stretch. Remove the kinks. This is just a reminder for anything we do. I know in one of the drills we had one of the, once again, what are the chances, but we had a 2.5 inch line get under a door threshold here, and they charged it, and you couldn't get it out. We had to shut the line down to get it out. And it was probably reducing our flow there by 50% when we did it. And it was just kind of one of those, what the fudge? What are the chances? But 100% here. But get rid of all your kinks, just like anything else. You don't want to restrict the flow any more than you have to. We're using 2.5 versus 1 3/4 because that's what's designed, and what we've determined is the correct amount of flow and pressure and reach and penetration that we have to properly address a active working high-rise fire, and that's what all the value is going to here. Just understand, just like anything else, check for heat on the door before opening, whether it be for the fire floor, fire door, or the apartment or whatever involved. You may need to use irons to get entry. Search and rescue. This is one of those that we do, search and rescue is always our top priority, but like anything else, is search and rescue practical when you've got a cubicle farm with a 10,000 square foot open area with zero visibility? Yeah, it's going to happen at some point in time, but we're probably going to search as we work. We're probably not going to be, unless we have a known rescue. If somebody calls and says, hey, we've got somebody trapped in the office on the northwest corner of the 15th floor, we're going to go to the northwest corner of the 15th floor. But if we just have an unknown rescue or no known rescues, and maybe even an occupant reported or resident reported all clear, we're probably just going to search as we go, because it's not practical to think we're going to do a right wall search on a 10,000 or 20,000 square foot cubicle farm. It's just virtually impossible, and it will never happen. But obviously, if we do have a rescue situation, and there are times where we have a rescue where and nationally and internationally, where they've got a number of people trapped. I watched a video of an incident that occurred in China the other day. They had 300 people evacuated to the roof. Unbelievable. I don't know how in the world you get 300 people off the roof of any building within 2 weeks. I don't know, but they did in this building. But so just understand, rescue profile is the most severely threatened, obviously largest number. After that, those with limited escape routes or method of removal. And then we have, the issue of whether we shelter or protect in place. And then we need to obviously search not only the involved floor, but floors above, obviously, is going to be our highest priority. Smoke and fire conditions, obviously, are going to dictate our method and order of accomplishing our search and rescue. Obviously, if you have clear conditions, we can search a floor pretty quickly. If we have zero visibility, that same search will take a dramatically long time or a number of additional resources. And then we have to decide, are we taking people away from the fire, or do we put out the fire to take the fire away from the people? So this is a little Captain Obvious stuff, but obviously the most severely threatened we address first, followed by the less severely threatened second. House lines, and this is one of those, our standpipe cabinets. Do we utilize these in high-rise buildings? Can we? We can, but we have a couple things we need to keep in mind. High rises, especially residential high rises, some of these places have 300-foot long hallways. I know the casino, Salt River Casino out there, I think Mike Mink said they have 300+ foot long stairwells, hallways. So you can imagine, we've got, 200-foot pre-connects. If we use those, we can't get all the way to the other end. If we take 50 feet, then we're going to lose 50 feet coming out of the floor below as we hook into the standpipe and everything else. We got 150 feet on the floor, and then we've got to get into the apartment and work our way to the back of the apartment. So is it practical to think we can get to every inch of the some of these fire floors, or certainly some of these commercial floors from the stairwell? It's probably not, but we also need to keep it strongly keep in mind that the challenges that come with if we hook into a standpipe connection or a hose cabinet, because if we get into trouble and we follow the hose line back, all it does is get us in the middle of the building, right? So versus the smooth bump gets us back to the pump here, or at least back to the standpipe. That's not the situation if we work out of a standpipe. So if we're going to use a hose cabinet or a standpipe that's in the middle of a hallway or something like that, I would tell you that we need to make sure we at least have one line into the middle of that operation that's going to be coming off of the standpipe that we can work our way back here. And then keep that in mind. Also, just keep in mind, we had the big box discussion here a couple of months ago, and we talked about 150-foot limitation. There may be times where we're going to need to utilize them more than 150 feet to make access into a fire. And that's just one that needs to be approved through command before we start making that change. We don't want to be, we find ourselves in zero visibility, 250 feet down a hose line. We're probably going to be in trouble before we run out, or we may run out of air before we get back to the standpipe. So So anytime we start doing those kind of things and doing things that are out of normal, we have potential to get ourselves into a bind and have a Mayday situation. Okay, so now we've talked about fire attack sector. We moved to lobby sector. This is once again another busy sector if you think about all the things that need to take place, and we'll kind of break down some of the things that happen as we go through here. But basically, lobby sector, all companies on the first and second alarm should report directly to the lobby. We need to limit staging outside of the building to reduce transit times. And we talked about, Chief Laughlin talked about transit times and some of the challenges with that. Getting crews between their company, their parking location and the lobby is going to be one of the longest, takes one of the longest times as far as deployment of our units. Tempe, when they had their working high-rise fire at West 6 and Tempe, if anybody knows downtown Tempe, they had extreme difficulty parking apparatus. They had apparatus that they literally needed to stage probably almost 2 blocks away. So now if you talk about you're one of the second alarm units coming in, so you're already coming in from a remote station with probably a 10-minute response time, you get there on the scene, it's going to take you 5 or hopefully less than 5 minutes to assemble your gear. But now I'm having to haul that gear, you know, a quarter of a mile to get to the lobby to be sent to the 17th floor. So you can talk about fatigue and some of the other challenges associated with that, but also just the transit time. So that's why we get those first and second alarm companies as quickly as possible in the lobby so we can deploy them from there and limit our transit times. But then one of the other responsibilities, obviously, for lobby sector is going to be to provide evacuation for occupants both in the lobby and those coming through the lobby, and then utilize PD to prevent reentry. One of the problems Tempe had in their incident, West 6 has a connecting pool level between the West 6 big tower, the 30-story tower, and the 22-story tower. So even though they blocked lobby, people would go up in the building next door, cross over on the pool level, and get into the building. So so anyway, sometimes you may have to address different things, and just, you know, sometimes occupants do things that are just a little silly. So primary function of lobby will be to deploy staged units from the lobby sector to the tactical assignment from command. Command fills their sector needs through and tactical assignments through lobby sector on the tactical radio channel. Lobby sector continuously should keep a first alarm assignment minimum in the lobby, and they will continue to request resources through staging on the staging channel. And then the lobby sector is responsible for accountability for crews sent to the lobby sector and their assignment from lobby. So that can be a big challenge you can imagine as you're trying to collect passports from 30 plus companies coming in the door and trying to figure out who's going where and stuff. So having an accountability system of some kind could be very important, whether it be clipboards, whether it just be a dry erase marker, whether it be a yellow pad that you take from the front desk, whatever it is, but have a plan in place so you can track the crews, where they're going and that type of thing. Command hopefully should also have an accountability system in place, but we need to have a secondary method of being able to identify where our crews are in the building and where they're assigned to. Make sure you organize the crews and equipment so they're easily retrievable. This is one of those things where, depending on the type of situation, you don't want to have a situation where you're trying to find engine 206 and 206, 2 of his members over there yucking it up with somebody else, and 2 guys are over there smoking and joking with somebody else from 215. And you know, you need to have everybody and, you know, keep them intact and ready to go, so that when we're ready to go, we give them the assignment and we send them up. Now, this is the other thing. One of the other things we learned from a recent fire that Tempe had is just having the ability to provide just a short briefing from lobby provided a tremendous amount of assistance for crews going aloft, because the size of some of these buildings is going to be very difficult. When you tell somebody, hey, engine 601 and engine 23, you guys are going up to the 15th floor to resource sector. You know, there's 15 stairwells. Which one do I take? Who do I report to? Who am I reporting with? All those kind of things. So if you have the ability to provide that information, really beneficial for the crews going up there. Make sure you collect those crew passports, and then once the other responsibilities, obviously, for lobby is to prep the elevator and get an operator elevator if they're going to use that. An elevator operator if they're going to be utilizing the elevator to take crews aloft. So here's the communications model for the lobby. So as command gets a request from the sector officers, they get a request, hey, I need 3 additional companies up here on the 12th floor. That goes to command. Command calls lobby and says, hey, I need 3 companies to the 12th floor here to report to sector 12 or whatever. Lobby says you're getting engine 211, engine 213, and engine 217. Back to command. Command calls sector officer, tells him he's getting 211, 213, 217 back. Lobby then says, I need to replace 3 companies. So he gets on the staging channel and calls the level 2 staging officer and say, I need 3 additional companies to replace that. And level 2 staging calls him back and says, you're getting now engine 201, engine 271, and engine 275 or whatever. And so this is kind of how the communication system works. Communications are always a challenge at high rises, just like any other thing, but being inside of a building and stuff, it even becomes more of a problem, which we'll talk about in a second. We talked about lobby space. Once again, the Alma School high-rise, fantastic. There's room enough in there for probably at least 10 crews if you needed to or more. This is West 6 lobby. You know, it's much more challenging, right? You go inside there, you've got, you know, everybody will be sitting on the nice $2,000 couches and their turnouts will be, anyway, some problems here. You would, you know, they were only able to get a couple of crews inside the lobby at West 6, but what they utilized was they had outside the lobby, they had a covered area that people drop off, you know, pick up and drop off people and that kind of stuff there. And they were able to put crews just outside the doors and still be in a safe area from falling glass and other things like that. So you may have to get creative if your lobby sector as far as where am I going to put my crews, because not every building is designed and fireman friendly as far as room for 10 or 12 crews. Evacuation stair team. This is once again our 7th company in. If things worked like we hope or like we planned anyway. Once again, they're not a sector, they're a stair team. They bring in their bottles and proper tools, no fire hose. Pick up a fire phone, set of keys. They're going to identify this evacuation stairwell or stairwells. And then they're going to choose whichever one they're going to work in. And once again, some of these buildings may have multiple stairwells. You may have multiple stair evacuation teams. And that's why you're going to identify, hey, we're East Stairwell Team or whatever, that East Evacuation Stairwell Team 2, whatever it is, so that you can have a designation and command will utilize as many of those as they need to clear those stairwells. So their responsibility to clear the stairwells and provide ventilation as necessary and assist with that. You can see the equipment field. So evacuation stair team, you identify your stairwell designation, identify the stairwell evacuation stairwells. If it hasn't already been done, that you're going to identify that, hey, the primary evacuation stairwell will be the east evacuation or east stairwell. Hopefully that's going to be relayed if it hasn't already been through the PA system, through system sector. And then you need to confirm also the evacuation plan through command if you haven't already done so. Is it a total building evacuation? If that's the case, everybody we see, we tell to go out. Is it in-building evacuation where we tell them, hey, you know, anybody below floor 7, stay in your room or whatever, and we'll only evacuate the people above that from a partial perspective, or are we sheltering in place? If everybody we just tell, you know, we don't necessarily tell anybody to evacuate other than just those that are self-evacuating only. And then you may have to respond to areas of self-refuge or safe refuge, because obviously people that may be handicapped or other people that are limited able or whatever, and may have a situation where they can't evacuate without using a elevator or something else that you may have to address as well. So we're going to obviously remove endangered occupants as quickly as possible, assist with ventilation issues. Now this crew is one that may have to stop when they encounter patients. As they encounter patients, they may need additional resources from command to say, hey, we've got 3 people with smoke inhalation on floor 6 in the east stairwell. We need 2 additional crews or whatever. So they are responsible for evacuating the stairwell. So they're going to work their way all the way to the top and evacuate and remove people as necessary and provide CAN reports. But as you can see in this lower picture here, you know, evacuation going up the down stairwell is not going to be easy to do when you got a lot of people coming out on an actual working incident. Check conditions of each floor, same kind of deal. As you're walking up, just peeking the floors to see whether or not you can, if you need to move people out of the stairwell into a safe, clean environment, you can at least know that, hey, go down to the 5th floor and get off on the stairwell landing, and you'll be safe on the 5th floor if you need to or whatever. You can determine some of those kind of things if you know, but obviously you'd be somewhat hesitant to do that probably if you don't know what floors are clear and which one are clear and which one aren't. Direct guide and advise occupants downstairs. Let's see. Once again, you may have certain areas of refuge that you may be called to, and we may have communications from building systems that tell you that, hey, there's 3 people in the area of refuge on the 5th floor on the west side, those kind of things. Some of the things you report to command, obviously, if you're locating, if occupant locations are being protected in place, you can relay that information. All clear on the stairwell if you get there. 901Hs, if you happen to locate people that are not salvageable and you're leaving them in place, that would be something you relate to command. And then you'll coordinate with the building system sector whether or not we need ventilation or pressurization as needed. So some special considerations for high-rise fires. We've already talked about this a little bit, but I can't reinforce it enough. The time, transit reflex time is a huge problem for us. You can imagine in the studies that we did, and I mean all the drills that we did in Tempe, the time it took between crews getting on the scene, hitting the air brakes, and making it with their equipment to the lobby was in excess of 12 minutes. And this was over 25 plus drills. So seems like a lot. Sometimes it's just a matter of how far they're parked away. Other times it's a matter of trying to figure out where all their gear is. Sometimes it's a matter of people, you know, dragging their feet. Who knows what? I don't know. Sometimes they're a little bit out of shape or whatever. But we've determined that one of the biggest challenges we have is that reflex time between on scene, getting an assignment, and actually making it to the lobby to be able to be deployed. So if there's anything I can reinforce to you, it would be please make sure that you're familiar with your equipment, where it is, what you need to take, and be ready to go so that if you get dispatched to one of these incidents, that there isn't any delay at all from the time that you arrive on the scene until you get to the lobby, because we know that we can only move so quickly as we ascend the floors. The other thing we determined was that for the 25 drills we did in Tempe and other places, then we did, I think the drill was on the 13th or 14th floor, but the average time it took us to get on the scene and before we were ready to make entry and make a fire attack in theory was 24 minutes, 20 seconds. So sometimes you go, crap. I mean, that's almost 30 minutes before we get on the scene and we actually put water on the fire. It's ridiculous. But these things are like special ops incidents. These are things that we need to make sure that we're prepared. We do things correctly so that when we actually get there, that we're prepared to do so and safe, and we got backup plans and other things in place. And a lot of it's just transit time and just the time it takes to get to the 14th or 15th floor, whatever floor you're going to. So not unusual, and that's also the national average. I think the national average is like 25 minutes or something like that to get between the arrival and fire attack beginning on a working high-rise fire. So we're about average from that perspective. Another question, what do we do if the fire's on the first floor? So we pull up on the high-rise, we got this big 7-unit deployment model and the fire's on the first floor. Now what do we do? You know, that can create some huge problems for us because the fire on the first floor cuts off the lobby, cuts off the natural escape routes for the occupants, probably may eliminate our ability to get access to the control room, may need to have the fire attack come directly off the engine companies at street level. So we may have to treat this thing, at least initially, kind of like just a house fire or anything else. We may come straight off the trucks with our hand lines and make our fire attacks on the first floor if the fire's on the first floor. And then building conditions may need to be evaluated by crews accessing the building from aerial ladders above ground level. You know, this may create some, as far as evacuation and stuff, may have to come off of the second floor or something like that from an exterior perspective if we have complete contamination in the lobby and a working fire in the first floor, and create some huge problems for us. But we need to be prepared for that as well. Breaking glass. We need to be careful about breaking glass. And I'll tell you, first of all, breaking glass in high-rise is extremely difficult to do. They're heavy, thick panels and difficult to break, but they will break. And we just need to be careful because obviously, and you hear stories, I haven't seen actual videos of it, you hear stories of sheets, gliding for quite a distance. If you get a significant size piece of glass that might, instead of all, breaking like a shower door or something like that, it just breaks into a pile, or a car door or a car window. These things can come out in shards and travel for a distance. So make sure if we're going to break windows that we coordinate that with command and make sure we don't have anybody down below. The other thing we need to make sure of is if we take out a window on the 15th floor and limited visibility, we need to figure out a way to block that window, especially if it goes floor to ceiling, right? Because we're in limited visibility. Next thing you know, somebody's coming in for a secondary search and down they go 15 floors because we have nothing there to prevent that. First in ladder company, or maybe second in ladder company for that matter, depending on where we're at. But on arrival, need to consider maybe an exterior size up. Do we need to use a rescue ladder for an aerial rescue? Do we have people hanging out the window or whatever? And that's going to change our 7-unit deployment model we talked about. Is there a need for an aerial for a vertical standpipe? Do we have standpipe problems? And we're going to be utilizing taking a ladder to maybe a platform, bringing it up to the 4th floor and running hand lines off of that, or a supply line off of the standpipe from an aerial. Are we going to use the aerial for a transitional attack? This is one of those we'll talk more about in a second, but it's a real option for us. It's something to consider if we start talking about a 25-minute deployment time. How long does it take us to get an aerial that can lay its own supply line, put an aerial up 6 floors and attack a fire in a fire compartment on the 9th floor? I would think less than 24 minutes. If not, we probably need to some work on some training. But that may be something to consider as well, because just like a residential fire, anything else, if we knock out the vast majority of the fire from a transitional attack with the straight stream and those kind of things, and we'll talk about safety associated with that, but that can eliminate the rescue problems and some of the other challenges we have with building contamination issues and smoke issues and all kinds of things. So keep those things in mind. So do we have a window rescue? Do we need a standpipe coming off one of the floors? There's a lot of things the ladder may be involved in. The ladder rescue you may have noticed or seen. Impressive. Spider-Man hanging outside the building. This is LA, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in California. Pretty good story. a transitional attack at this level, you think? Probably do a transitional attack with a 2.5 in the ground, certainly with a depth gun, and easily with the ladder guns, right? But just a consideration. I probably wouldn't do it necessarily maybe while I was trying to get this guy down, so I didn't knock him down with my Stain gun, because we're always aiming in the wrong direction. But certainly something you could do with as you're making your fire attack here. So we got 2 people on the aerial, on the fly. So pretty good rescue. A pretty brave guy. I don't know if well, I guess if you're going to burn up, I'd probably get out the window, but that's pretty impressive. Now, a couple things to look at here. So 2 things to think about, and this one kind of comes reminded me a little bit. So is we're adjusting the aerial with people on it. Is that dangerous for us? Maybe if you're on the top fly section, but how about sections 2 and 3, or if you're not quite there? You've got people, so this, the second guy is midway up and you're adjusting the aerial, what can happen there? Lose fingers, and I mean, fingers and toes, especially toes and feet. Yeah, so, but this, I know they recently had an incident in somewhere back east where a guy got his feet trapped in between the aerial. It took him a while to get him out, crushed the crud out of him. So just be really careful. This is one of those situations where adjusting, it may need to happen a little bit. And now, do we have any straight stick aerials still working in Mesa, or do we have 14? Okay, so 14. So we do have straight stick aerials. And Phoenix is actually buying new ones. Tempe went to all platforms, but Phoenix is back to buying, I'm not sure why, but they're back to buying stick aerials. So this can happen. This is one of those where, certainly we need to be prepared to utilize this, and for a rescue, certainly appropriate as well. But just understand that if you're the engineer and at the control panel, that make sure people we're not in harm's way, because it's not going to do us any good if you chop somebody's feet off halfway up that aerial as we're trying to make a rescue now. Now we got 2 people we're worried about. So just something to consider here. Also, it's like anything else. And Paulie, I don't know if you want to chime in on this a little bit. Just, anytime you got somebody that's hanging off the side of a building and you get an aerial near it, what's the propensity for the victim to do, or whatever? Jump, right? I mean, if they're hanging on by their fingers and they're burning up, are we ready for that? Are we tied in, or is he going to jump, hit that person, take both people down to the ground? So we need to be careful about that as well. I know they used to tell us, and Paulie can help me out, because this is from 100 years ago when I was on a ladder truck, but don't move next to the window until you're ready to go, because as soon as you get within reach of these folks, a lot of times they're coming because they've been hanging on the side of a building, or they're about to die. Paulie, any thoughts on where
absolutely. We always talk about, if you have the opportunity, approach from the highest point. So if you can get actually above them, like, that's the best approach, is actually get up above them and talk to them and let them know what you're going to do. That way you don't have them jumping, because the biggest thing is and there's videos on videos, obviously, ladders do not have the ability for the twist force. So anything that causes that twist, especially aerial, even more than the platform, somebody jumps and lands on your aerial ladder, it's going to twist that ladder, and that thing will fold in less than 100 foot-pounds. So if they jump on it, it's going to twist, it's going to go to the ground, potentially kill, or at least, significantly injure. So this guy, he just obviously ran out of stick, and did a good job. Obviously,
Yeah.
Probably was talking. We didn't hear that, but I'm sure he was coaching them, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to hopefully, and that's the key, is that every rescue that at least I've been a part of, I always say over and over that they act as if they have no brain in their head, and they're at their worst end. So expect them to do unexpected things, and we've got to approach it and make sure that we're the ones taking command and taking control, or they'll do the things that are going to get us in trouble. So yeah, that's a great, I think it's LA. I was going to say that's great.
And were you guys able to hear Paulie's comments there, I hope, in the field? Anybody? Anyway, but hopefully you were, but basically one of the things just to consider here is that this is like a drowning person. If you talk about drowning people, these people aren't thinking rational when they're thinking they're about to burn to death or fall to the death here. It's hard sometimes to be able to you need to be prepared as you get close to the building, to prepare for them to do unusual or unpredictable things here. So, but just as Captain Liddell said, be careful, because we don't need side stresses on these ladders, or we have potential for collapse. So, in areas with firefighters on the ladder itself. If we have a situation as to the building with a ladder truck, I would think we'd have pretty good opportunity to provide a transitional attack if needed. So just something to consider. Doesn't have to happen every time. It may not be the appropriate or best choice, but if it is, certainly consider a transitional attack either from the ground with a 2.5 stand or a stain gun or a potential aerial attack. You can see some of these here. What's the benefit? Is it, do we have a better opportunity of getting the water in the fire compartment through an exterior attack or through an interior attack? And that's just a decision that the command will have to make. Aerial transitional attack or any type of transitional attack is make sure that the crews that are working their way up from the interior are not in the hallway or in the fire occupancy itself. Now, we know through modern fire attack that if we're using a straight stream, we don't push a whole lot of water, or push a lot of air. But if you're using 1,000 GPM master stream, you're going to push some air. And you're going to also have the ability to not only just the sheer volume, obviously 1,000 gallons of water at 8 pounds per gallon and under pressure and stuff. If you just have people in that fire occupancy or that space, the potential for injury just from the water itself could be a significant challenge for us. So just before you're going to make that transitional attack, just make sure that that everybody's out of the fire apartment itself or the occupancy itself, out of the stairwell if necessary, if the door's not, if we don't have door control, if we don't have the door closed or whatever, so we don't have additional people injured. Here's a transitional attack. Took a little while. This is like Singapore. Which is, but certainly with a stain gun, probably at least 5 or 6 floors as well, if you got good angle and access and a good supply line and stuff. So else, if it's a tool in the toolbox, it's something we don't use every time, but it's something, if it's the appropriate tool, consider it. Also, we may have to get creative here. This is an incident, I think it was Atlanta or someplace else here. They're a couple floors down, just spraying water from there, trying to get water in the fire, right? So depending on the shape of the building, size of the building, maybe the building next door. So there's other options here as far as just, can we get creative and make a fire attack here as we're trying to, maybe the attack line inside or maybe the conditions are even untenable even to open the door in there from the stairwell. I don't know, but just, we may. Another thing we talk about fire attack also in high rises, just due to the involvement and access to additional hand lines and other things, is if we have the office or apartment room is closed and well involved, can we punch a hole next to the sheetrock next to the door and flow of water before we open the door? Can we go to the adjoining apartment and take an attack through a common wall here, at least to knock things down a little bit? Here, just some things, something like this. We got red hot. 2.5 through that door. You think we'll knock down a good percentage of that before we open the door? Probably be able to. We don't do it all the time. But if not, can punch a little hole through the side there and make an attack and walking down the main before we open the door and keep it vent limited and get that steam conversion we hope to do, like we do with the attack spike and other things. So just things to think about. Keep the vent control. Obviously, do helicopter rescues out in the desert and on Camelback Mountain and stuff all the time. So we certainly can do that, but certainly if we do it coming off the top of a working high-rise fire with smoke and conditions that are not necessarily favorable to our flying conditions, maybe a little riskier, right? So I mean, it's something that certainly can happen, but it's not something I would go, hey, if I have a choice to send them down to the ground or send them to the roof, I'm not going to send them to the roof. And now a lot of, used to, I know, and I found it changed, used to have to require helipad on way back in the 80s and stuff like that. Have antennas and everything else up there now, so they're trying to find even a clear space to make roof rescue. So it can happen if somebody goes up there and there's just no other way around it. Certainly it's something that can happen, and we have helicopters that are capable of doing roof rescues. Understand that this isn't something I would use as my first choice. This would be a last resort kind of thing, because obviously high risk, hazardous. Communication. Something to consider. So we talk about the red fire phones, cell phones and landlines, maybe one of those that they've utilized internationally and nationally for working high-rise fires on a somewhat regular basis. Is you may have to call command direct on a cell phone in a clear area and just say, hey, here's what we got. I need 3 more crews up here. I've been trying to call you for 10 minutes and I know you're ignoring me or whatever, but I'm losing my mind here, but this is what we need. So just consider that maybe something to consider as well. We have to get creative sometimes. And then also understand that sometimes not all the radio communication needs to go through command. Sector to sector may be a big deal. Systems to, stairwell attack teams may be trying to pressurize the stairwell. Some of that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily need to go through command. So, but the things that have to go through command are changing conditions, either good or bad, benchmarks attained, need for more resources, and life safety issues. Those things have to go through command. You can't bypass them for those. Things that can go wrong, building and fire protection systems. You can see here the standpipe just blew out of the wall. That's kind of creates a little bit of a problem for you. The picture in the lower right corner is the absolute jet black color water that's coming out of the standpipe over there. So you can see that I don't know how long that water's been sitting there, but that's, who knows what kind of problems that's going to create. We have arson, other issues. One of the things that Chief Slayer said, had mentioned that they did some testing in some of the high-rise training classes that they provide back in Florida. And they've determined that if we have to, they can run a 2.5-inch exterior standpipe up the side of the building up to 200 feet without failure. After that, then it pulls the couplings out. If the weight of the thing can potentially pull couplings out. So if you had to run an exterior standpipe up, either dropping a line down and pulling something up or whatever, however you would did that. If you literally had to connect your line and feed it down and hook it into an exterior truck or something because just nothing's working, they've determined you can do that up to 200 feet and still be operational. No floor 13. Kind of interesting, but there's a lot of buildings still don't have a floor 13. So keep that in mind. Of course, Murphy's Law is going to say it's between 12 and 14, or it's on floor 12, and you go, okay, go to the floor above 13. There isn't a 13. They're looking around for floor 13 and wondering why there's no landing at 13, and there isn't one. So just understand that, just not a big deal, but just if you have, have something that's between, 12 and 14 or 12 and 15, that you may have some confusion about what floor am I going to. Fire system, we're going to move very quickly through this, but just understand a lot of the new high rises, everything in Tempe has been built in the last probably at least 15 years, which is the majority of their new stuff here, is they have a fire system, which is the firefighter air system here, and basically consider it a standpipe with air is what it's designed to be. The problem we have with these is not all of them require storage for their systems. So a lot of times you'll see something like, I'll go to it in a second here. But anyway, typically you have these fill stations every 2 to 3 floors. A lot of times they're located near the elevators or the stairwell landings. But you can obviously refill bottles. This is what the system looks like. Some of the cabinets, what it would look like. And here's some of the challenges you have. Some of the systems only have a couple of bottles. These 2 bottles here will probably fill 4 or 5 bottles, and then you're empty. So this has to be supplied. The system has to be supplied by a utility company with a compressor to be effective here. And then also keep in mind that, because we used to think when Tempe first put these in, we thought, great, we don't have to carry bottles up anymore. This is gonna be the best thing ever. Well, it doesn't really work that way. We found that they did some testing. I think it was Mike Davis or somebody did some testing with some of this stuff, and they found that they were only able to fill, 4 or 5 bottles an hour kind of stuff, or some kind of crazy number that you went. And that's, if we don't have people on 3 floors trying to do the same thing at a time. So it's not really effective. It can work a little bit, but just not something you can go in there and go and, hey, we'll all be fine, guys. We'll all just top off our bottles every 3 floors or every 10 floors. I wouldn't necessarily say that. So it's an option. It's something that's good. Just need to make sure you get a utility truck in there for support, and then be in a position to understand that you need to bring your own bottles anyway to start with. Now, Phoenix Fire has a high-rise truck that they have. They have some different things in it that are specially designed for high rises, and that any working fire probably in the system will get the Phoenix high-rise team, which is engine 1, 2, I don't know, they got 9 and a few other ones, but they have some specialized equipment, some telescoping ladders to utilize inside the elevators, air bottle carts. They've got hose carts, specialty hand tools, interior master stream nozzles, standpipe repair kits. They've got a system designed so that they can literally cut a piece of the standpipe out and replace it with other stuff that they have, materials they have, if they have a system like that. So obviously not going to be a quick thing, but if you have a fire that goes for 19 hours like the one in Philadelphia, or 3 hours like the one in LA, you might have enough time to do that if you had a major problem. But anyway, so they have some different things. They also have some radio kits that they have, and I'm not sure if we've looked into those yet, but Tempe's in the process of buying 2 that you can bring inside and boost the radio signal. It's a little Pelican box that you bring inside, and it has different equipment and stuff inside that, I don't know if it's antennas or boosters or whatever, that allows you to have additional radio communication capabilities from the interior of the structure. But this is some of the high-rise equipment they have. They have a set here that's 300 feet of supply hose, air supply hose, and then a distribution system as well. So you can bring that up to the fire floor, run it down through the stairwell or wherever out the door to an additional utility truck and fill bottles. So I'm just gonna really fly through this here. Just what Tempe had, they're working high-rise fire, and just a couple of things that they learned from, just so you can see here. Dispatch time, between the time they got on the scene and the time crews got to the door, and they have crews there arriving very quickly. If you look at the assignments here, 46 dispatch, 48 on arrival, 50 for the stairwell attack team assigned less than 4 minutes later. Fire attack team was assigned less than 6 minutes later. Lobby assigned like 10 minutes later here. Anyway, but if you look at the fire attack team, begins their ascent at 23:05. It took them 15 and a half minutes since they got on the scene before they started making the trip to the fire floor. And then the attack team made the fire floor and was ready to make attack at 24 minutes on the scene. So just, we talk about how long it takes to get there. It takes a while, but to do it correctly, we need to be careful. Plan for building failure. They had problems with they got inside the fire control room, and the printer, which has all the printout, it printed back on itself. It normally just feeds out into the ground. It somehow or another got wrapped back on itself. So it was all just a big ball of mess, big hot mess of paper. So there's no way to get any indication as what they had. The PA system would work, and then all the lights would flash and it would go off and not work. And it would do that for halfway through the incident, and it would come on and off, and you never knew what was going to happen. One of the sprinklers, like I say, had been previously damaged, so it didn't actually put the fire out. So just things like this can happen. The attack team, well, just understand that once again, these crews go up at different levels here, and be careful as far as the crew fitness and stuff. The challenges there. Provide good, accurate reports. That was one of the challenges command had. They didn't get good reports necessarily from interior crews as to what they had. You're flying blind outside. You can't see anything. All you're doing is relying on crews' reports, and they didn't get real good reports initially as to what they had as far as conditions and fire stuff. Lobby, once again, huge problems trying to find space in there. Bless you. Have a system to coordinate passports, and just understand organizational is critical at high-rise events. Initial sector development or deployment is going to be critical to our success in these operations. As Chief Lachlan mentioned, this is one thing where I know that it may not necessarily make sense logically that this is the system we need to use, but we found through what we've done with our training and drills, and then through other events that have occurred nationally and internationally, that our system, I think, will be effective potentially if we do have a significant incident. So once again, high-risk, low-frequency events. So with that, someday we're going to have the drone. This is something in China they're trying. This is kind of cool. China actually is using this right now, or at least trying it. So someday we won't have to worry about it. Just a shout out also to Mike Mink and Chris Slayer. They provided some of the materials here, some of that they provided for the East Valley Command, and we utilized some of that materials from a consistency perspective here today as well. So questions, thoughts, concerns, Highrise, anything that you can think of that that we didn't answer today or that you have questions about, or anything that may come into anybody's mind here? We got a lot of material we were covering, and we know this has been a long morning here for you, but we wanted to be able to try to provide the information necessary for our company officers to feel more comfortable if they happen to go to a Highrise event. Captain Barnhart, please.
Reiterate when we talked about the in-transit time or the time it took to get off your rig to lobby sector. I was in the CRV at the W6, West 6 fire, and the frustration from our sector officers was palpable when they say they want squeegees to the 7th floor. Well, it's easy to get the squeegees off of the first alarm assignment, maybe even the second alarm. When the second request for squeegees comes in, now it's taking crews 20 minutes just to get to apparatus to go find the tools and equipment, then 20 minutes to come back. So crews, if you're forward deployed, be patient, anticipate what you're going to need, and call for those resources early. So that's it.
Anybody else? Were you guys able to hear Captain Barnhart's comments? I hope. I don't know if anybody's still online or not, but anyway, that very important to understand that the transit times are incredibly challenging for us. And once again, the greater the alarm, the further our apparatus are going to be away. So we need to make sure we bring the proper equipment and be forecast those needs as well. Anything else from anybody? All right, I've got just one scenario today. If anybody wants to volunteer to do a scenario. Anybody online want to run a scenario for us by any chance? Polly, is anybody left online? Anybody in here want to run a scenario? If not, we'll just talk through it if not. Okay, so we'll just talk through this one just to get some ideas here, just kind of put it all together here. So if we were to get an incident today, and once again, as we go through the process here, so we get dispatched to the 22 North Robeson for a working fire, potentially, or apartment fire. This is an incident at the Courtyard Towers. Everybody's probably, at least in Mesa, is probably familiar with this structure. It is now currently being renovated, and we're actually hoping to get some opportunities to do some drills here in the fall here with this structure, with some high-rise drills. But anyway, if you get dispatched here, obviously you can look at the units here. We got 201, 2203, 203. We got a 3-in-1 assignment for a working fire. Let's see. It goes to a first en route if just because the alarm room gets some information, and so it went to a first alarm for this dispatch. So you can see the crews that are responding. You see our map here. You can see the star in the middle where the incident's occurring. You can see we've got pretty good hydrants around. We got 3 different hydrants, two on the east and one on the west side there. So we got pretty good access from a hydrants perspective and coverage. So as we get dispatched, we pull out, we get on the road. Okay, when we get to this point here, when we get to the point where we see this, what should we be thinking? This is one where we should, I mean, if we haven't already went to a first, we should go to a first. We should take this to a third alarm. If we're thinking correctly here, this is one we probably ought to come back immediately and call the alarm room and say, hey, engine 201 to alarm. We've got signs of an obvious working fire. Go ahead and give me the balance of a second alarm. Level 1 staging will be in the lobby here still, so that we're going to do this. We're making our 360 here driving. Sometimes we do and don't do this depending on whether we're the first 2 unit. We may or may not do a drive around 360. This is designed for the battalion, but you can see as we come around the corner, we've got a working fire on the 9th floor here. So we see in the back here, we've got our standpipe sprinkler connections. Fire control room is just behind that bush right there. And then we're on the scene here. So right now we ought to be looking at this thing and thinking a number of things. If we think about the training we did today, one of the things that ought to be coming to mind here is, why is this building on fire? We ought to be wondering what's going on. Do we not have sprinklers? This is a sprinklered building, but we have active fire on the floor here. So that should make us worry about, do we have a sprinkler sprinkler isolation valve that's closed here? Do we have an arson incident? Do we have a sprinkler problem? Do we have a fire pump problem? I mean, there's about 15 things ought to be running through your mind right now as you've requested a second and third alarm here as you're coming in. So your first due company comes on the scene, they give the on-scene report, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, looks like 12 story, I believe here, okay? And so this is, engine 201's on the scene, give the alarm in the report, we're on scene with the working fire on the 9th floor of a 12-story, looks like 13-story building. We'll be assuming universities at 14, I'm trying to do the math here. Anyway, 14-story building, whatever. But that's something if we start out with 14 and we do the math or somebody goes inside and determines it's something else, we just update that. But we got a working fire on the 9th floor. So we're gonna assume building system sector. Our next company coming in, we're gonna send them to the fire. Now this is once again, are we gonna do a transitional attack on this? Absolutely, why not, right? This has got great access. They've got a hydrant right down here that an engine company right here could easily pull in there, hook up with that and knock the crap out of that thing probably before our attack team gets inside and gets everything assembled and ready to go. And then they're gonna go up and still have to put finish cleaning things up here, but there's probably a real good chance that doing that is gonna keep it from looking like this, right? Because otherwise we're 20 plus minutes before we're probably gonna get up there, probably at least 15 on the 9th floor before we're gonna get up there and actually get water on the fire. So by doing a stain gun attack here, you certainly could use, ladder pipe, but it would probably take a little longer, but even maybe a 2.5 might be a reach. So I'd probably consider that stain gun if we have operational, a position where we can get a good stain gun attack here. But this is one that I would definitely consider a transitional attack, right? Okay, so we instead of having our second due company go and hook up to the standpipe, maybe it's now company 3 becomes our FDC and our fire attack stair team. And then teams 4, 5, and 6 become our fire attack team. Team 7 becomes lobby, and team 8 becomes the evacuation stair team. So, once again, we make adjustments as we need. If we have somebody hanging out hanging off the balcony over here on this area up here on the 10th floor, now we get a ladder in here. And we maybe move that ladder in to try to make a window rescue. Or something to that. If we have somebody down here, we can do a window rescue if necessary or whatever. We certainly, I would think with the setbacks here, I would think that we can probably, 100-foot aerials? Help me out here. Sorry, guys, I don't know as much as I should about.
Yeah, 100-foot. So all of our mid mounts are 100-foot,
Yeah.
and the majorities of our rear ones are 85.
So we should be able to, with the 100-foot mid mount, if we're in the right position, probably get 8 floors, maybe 7, 8 if we're lucky. What do you think, Paulie? 7, 8 floor for a rescue if we needed to?
Yeah, we'd go easy. Probably 8,
With setback?
8.5 with
Okay.
and with the mid mounts, you can get pretty close to it. I'd say
Yeah.
that'd be closer to almost to the 9th.
So if we have good position and we don't have, obviously, just like anything else, Murphy's Law says there'll be 500 cars parked in there, but if we have good access and stuff, that we could probably get at least 8 on this building, probably with our mid mount and maybe as much as 9. But just certainly and this is some of those things we talk about as you're doing training and other things and you're doing your tabletop stuff and on a Saturday or whatever, if you're out doing some training, is start looking at those things, whether you put your aerial up and in comparison to a building and you measure a building, go, hey, this is a 50-foot tall, a tilt slab building, but we're at least 30 feet over that. And if I'm 12 feet or 20 feet away from the building, that we can probably reach 75. Do the math, do some training so that when you show up at something like this, that you don't go, I have no idea if I can reach. I hope that you're familiar with your company or your apparatus enough that you know that if I spot my apparatus here and we come off the side on a side mount, which is gives us our best sweep or whatever, that we know that we're going to have good access up to the sixth floor and above or whatever we're at there. So as we send crews up there, we're obviously going to get our fire attack team, or if we do our transitional attack, this is probably what it's going to look like, I would guess, before we get our crews up to the fire floor, and that's not a bad thing.
If
yeah,
I can, one of the things, we did a similar drill when we were doing our East Valley ladder training. And so this is really covering the majority of all units in the East Valley when we talk about ladders. On average, 5 minutes, they were fully deployed to the 5th floor and ready for a rescue operation. I know the mid-mounts can be completely outrigger deployed and ready in less than a minute, which you couple that with a close hydrant and a crew of 4. There's really no reason, if I remember your slide earlier, I think you said about 7.5 minutes. Going back a few slides, excuse me, it's about 7.5 minutes before you were working, the attack team or the stairwell team was working up. So to me, I say within 5 to 6 minutes, we've got water in the fire. If you're using one of your first 2 ladder trucks, whether it be your primary or secondary, you could do a transitional well under the time before we put people even on that floor. And it would be a concern.
Sure. And that's the judgment call we make as command and the incident commander, initial incident commander, and then followed by obviously IC number 2, which will typically be a battalion or east deputy. And that's the decision we make. We look at this and we weigh it out, risk benefit, time benefit, and decide, because, are we better off if we have access and set back some of these things. I know a lot of the Tempe high rises are set on lakes and other things like that, so that you don't have the ability to necessarily get around to certain sides of the building and stuff like that, depending on the fire is. But if we do have access and ready access as we do here, that's certainly an option that we could consider early on and probably be very effective in it, as long as we make sure, once again, before we open that nozzle, that I would, the ladder company or engine company, whoever's going to make that a transitional attack, gets with command and says, confirm we don't have anybody in the fire department at this time or anybody on the fire floor, at least without notifying them that we're getting ready to do a transitional attack, just like we do with anything else on something like this. So any other thoughts on this? This will be a challenge for us. This would be a 3-alarm incident easily. If you start doing the math and start adding up just all the companies we're going to need to not only be able to stretch 1 line on this floor, but 2 lines on this floor and a backup line, get crews above the fire, crews below the fire, you remove occupants from both stairwells or multiple stairwells, get, loss control, occupant services, anybody that's injured. I mean, you start doing the math here, we're at least a 3rd alarm, and this is without even batting an eye here. So don't hesitate to call early and often. But these are challenging incidents. I don't know, hopefully we don't have a lot of working high-rise fires, but certainly just like anything else, we may go 10 years or we may have one tonight. We need to be ready for it. So be familiar with your 7-unit deployment model cards. Go out and pre-plan these places. If you have something in your first 2 area, or if you're one of the first 7 units within the distance of a high-rise, I would tell you, work with your shift commander, work with fire prevention. If you want to go over and tour these places, get approval, but go over and take fire prevention, meet a building engineer and sit in the building systems in there and take a look and learn how to use all this stuff. Have somebody point out that, hey, this is what the screen shows and this is what you're going to see and this is where zone 4, suite 5 is, that kind of stuff. So it's not the first time you've been in these buildings. There's not so many of these that we can't be somewhat familiar with our high rises in our area. So Chiefs, anybody back here, any other thoughts to close us out here, guys? Anybody else in the room? Anyway, for those of you online, we appreciate you joining us here today. If you have questions that weren't answered, please go ahead and unmute now and ask those questions. If not, we appreciate your participation. For anybody that doesn't know, we're at module 13 right now. All of our modules are now on the Mesa YouTube channel. Everything from module 1 up to module 13 now, and today's will be put on there sometime in the next few days here. So any of the previous training sessions we've had are accessible as well now. So if not, thank you for being here. We appreciate your willingness to learn with us, and be safe and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.